you're ready.
All right,
Take your time.
This will be simpler. I forgot my computer.
I'm ready to go.
All right, here we go. Good evening. I call the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Monday, March 14th, 2020 to order. Can I get a motion to go into executive session?
I move that we go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss with respect to collective bargaining for all town unions, and the chair has determined that open session would have a detrimental effect on the town's bargaining position.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to go into executive session at 5:45. Only note is we will return to open session no later than 6:30 PM. Roll call vote, Larry,
Aye.
Mary,
Aye.
and I am an aye. We are in executive session,
Okay,
and we are going downstairs.
Yes, please.
we can do that.
Thank you, Matt.
Now, Joe, does Matt bargaining, no decisions were made. Would you please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pleasure.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Call on each chair to open your meetings when we get to that portion of the meeting.
Thank you, Michael.
First up is public comment and announcement. Anyone for public comment and announcement?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could just say that all of the microphones are presently in use, so we just ask everyone to speak up, and we expect that to be covered by the many microphones that are in the room.
Talk like you're in the auditorium.
Good evening, I'm Sheila House from Harbor 2 Services Committee. I'm just here to get the board's blessing as well as let people know that the Brooks Park Summer Concert Series is going to be back on this summer. We've had a 2-year hiatus because of COVID, and so there's 4 bands playing starting on July 11th, 4 Monday nights in a row. We've got Katie Flynn, who's a local, opening up, and Pitchfork the second week, local legend Kathleen Heaton the third week, and then there will be sensible shoes for the final week. So it's a great place to bring a picnic and a blanket and a chair and your family, and we're glad to have it back. So,
Great. Thank you.
thanks.
Mr. Chairman.
Good evening.
Peter Hughes from South Harwich. I'm here this evening to seek approval and support for a concept using town-owned property to help us display our solidarity for the people of Ukraine. The concept is to convert our 1,500 plus blue fire hydrants into what I call crannies, or cranies. Cranny looks like this. The Ukrainian flag is blue and yellow. We have a nice base with blue fire hydrants, a simple yellow piece of tape on each fire hydrant. I think would very well remind people about what's going on in Ukraine and display and demonstrate our support and solidarity for the people in Ukraine. This would be a volunteer effort. I have, to start with, broken down the 24 major roadway sections in the town. The idea is that people would come and get their supplies at the community center. By the way, it's a rag and a piece of yellow roll of tape. Here we go. That's all you have to do. They will be available subject to your approval, and the Water Commission is voting to approve this at their meeting on Wednesday. They would come, sign up, take their materials, and go do their work. Eventually, once we roll it out this weekend, by the way, that would start Thursday at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the supplies would be available anytime thereafter at the desk at the community center during their hours of operation. So once you roll this phase out, get Route 28 and 39 and 137, et cetera, all nicely decorated, if you will, then we would roll it out to the neighborhoods as they wanted. So people could stop in, get some tape, maybe do 2 or 3 streets, if you will, good thing for people who walk, quite frankly. So, fire chief is all for it, he doesn't have a problem with us and the hydrants. The water superintendent is for it, although they're gonna take an official vote, on Wednesday morning, they'll schedule a special meeting just to do that. And, I will have all the materials Wednesday evening, and we'll launch hopefully with your support on, Thursday morning. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. I have no problem supporting this, but we are not in a position to take an official vote tonight. And I would wait until after the water commissioners, since they control the fire hydrants, to make their vote. We do have a meeting on Thursday night, so you'd have to hold this off until Friday morning. But we could vote it Thursday night. That agenda hasn't been posted yet.
Okay.
Joe, any problem? Is that the
No,
way
I
you
think
see
that's
it?
I think that's the way to go, and it's definitely something that we can leverage the timing with the hearings on Thursday to get this done.
Okay, so everything I said about Thursday morning, Bill. Thank you very much.
I can straw poll the board to make sure there's no problem. Is there any
I'm fine
problem?
with it.
I'm all in favor.
So you know what your answer is gonna be, we just have to vote it Thursday
I
night.
understand.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Great,
Don't
great,
forget to sign
great,
up.
great work. Good evening.
Michael, will there be an opportunity tonight to discuss the cultural center? Will the public have a chance to do that later?
Item D.
Item D. Yes, yes, public will be able to participate. Yes.
Oh,
Thank you, John.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Leo Kukunis for the record. I first would like to welcome Julie and Mary to the board. I haven't had an opportunity to see either of you since you've been here, so welcome. For the record, I've been in town for many years. As I was driving here, I was trying to think of how many, but I can safely say that I think I've participated and acted as not only a volunteer, but as an elected official in this town and in the county for 40 years. Okay.
They were right.
The display that angered me to no end. I understand there's a open meeting law violation that's been filed against the town, and you will be dealing with that as it comes before you. However, and I do want to say, I don't expect any response from the board tonight. This is open session, it's not on the agenda, so your silence when I leave this podium is fully understanding. However, I have to tell you, if you have not watched the video, you need to. It was a blatant display of a slap in the face to the taxpayers and the residents of this town. Many times, many boards that I have sat on, with many of you up there, we have ended meetings, collected up our wares, and certainly walked down the staircase, and just out of sheer human nature, maybe discussed what we just talked about, or something else that was in front of that committee or board. That's an understandable mistake. But when you blatantly hear a member of a board, specifically the finance committee, ask, is the video still running? And the chair says, yeah, the red light's on, means it's still running. Waits, and then asks a second time, is the video still running? Red light, I presume, was off, because the chair says to him in the video, it's off now. And he says, great, now we can get down to the real meeting. Now, the members, as you can see clearly in this video, they didn't continue to pack up their wares and put their coats on. There wasn't a discussion in the hallway as they're walking out to their cars. The 2 minutes that I have possession of after the meeting closed, they sat back down in their chairs, took their jackets off, and opened up their books or their computer laptops. They obviously continued to debate. And I'll tell you, when I saw it, and as I'm getting angry now, it really got my feathers up. What are you people hiding? What are these boards and committees hiding that they cannot do the public business in front of the never trust the Finance Committee again, never. And I also want to say, there are members on the Finance Committee that have been elected officials in the past. In fact, sat right up there in the seats that you're occupying now. They know better, plain and simple. They know better. This was a blatant act to do something behind closed doors. I'm only going to ask you, as the Board of Selectmen, that from this day forward, when you appoint people to any board and committee, you should make it mandatory that they know open meeting law rules and regulations. There are laws on the books that require us to take ethics courses online. You should find a way to make sure that every single volunteer understands open meeting law. I hope that you don't just sit back and do nothing about this. I understand one of the members has already resigned. As far as I'm concerned, they should all resign. They should all resign. That's how blatant of offense this was. But I think, because I know how hard it is to get volunteers, we at minimum need to require that everyone take open meeting law training. Because that's the only way they're going to behave in the manner that they should. I find it, and I think I'm speaking for a lot of citizens in this town, because I wasn't going to come tonight. I took a bad spill at the farm about an hour ago. I can barely walk. But I know that there's a lot of people in this town that have called me and were waiting for me to come here tonight to make sure that you, the Board of Selectmen, were going to do something about this. More than just answer the open meeting law complaint. Because I guarantee you, I think the state's going to come down hard. That's a blatant violation of open meeting law. And I know that they're going to require training. So preempt it and get ready to do it now for us. Because once again, I have no trust whatsoever in a board that blatantly says after the cameras are off, now we can have the real meeting and get down to business. That's pretty bad. Thank you again, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment announcement? Okay, if I could ask Capital Outlay that's at the front table to maybe switch seats with these ladies up front that are gonna do a presentation on the audit and federal awards program first. So we did get our audit from
Mr.
Powers
Chairman,
and Sullivan.
If I could, we have some comfortable seats for some Capital Outlay members.
Oh, sure.
And then as soon,
As they wait, we want to be gracious hosts.
as soon as that's concluded, we will invite you back up.
Sorry, guys.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
Are we ready?
Yes. Introduce yourselves for the record.
Yes. I'm Renee Davis. I'm audit partner with Powers and Sullivan.
I'm Romina Mamelli. I am also an audit partner with Powers and Sullivan. I am the in-field, in-charge audit partner, whereas Renee does all of the concurring review.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you. So we're here tonight to go over the results of the town's fiscal year 2021 audit. So you're in the middle of fiscal year 2022. I know talking a lot about the 2023 budget process. We're going to take you back a step. It's a never-ending process, but as you know, the audit happens after the books are closed, so after the fiscal year. So we're going to go through the ACFR, the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, and your federal awards audit that we did for fiscal year 2021. Talk a little bit about, I want to make sure I don't cover the mic. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
So talk about the objective of an audit, what an independent audit is. As Romina mentioned, she's the in-field auditor, a little bit different in times of COVID. We've done a little bit more of that work remotely. We're looking forward to be able to return fully back to the field to do our audit procedures. We're fortunate enough to have the technology to be able to do some of those procedures remotely and gather documents remotely. So in-field is a term we use, but it hasn't been able to happen to the full extent for the past 2 years. So we go through the audit process, as I mentioned, goes on throughout the year. We actually start the process in the springtime, looking at the town's system of internal controls, looking at your financial departments and how they reconcile the books, how they keep the town's records, how they make sure that they are in compliance with what town meeting votes for a budget. and to make sure that all of the reports that they're preparing for you throughout the year are accurate and that they have good, strong ledgers. We, based on that, so we start in the beginning of the year, we start before you close the books, doing some of the testing. We come back, or we finish the audit after the books are closed. Here in Harwich, we're usually able to do that pretty early on. In August, we're doing the year-end final, where we confirm your debt amounts with outside parties, we confirm your investment in cash balances with outside parties, we get some legal representations, we look at what's been going on in the town at the close of the year to make sure you have a good cutoff and good budget procedures. And usually that happens, I'm gonna say by end of August, which is pretty early to pull all of that together for a June 30th year end. And then putting together your annual comprehensive report. So the report's a pretty significant report to put together, and we are usually waiting. There's some long-term liabilities that get reported after that. So we get some of the reports, especially OPEB, we'll talk about the OPEB. We get those reports after the fact and we test them. That actually didn't come in until the end of December this year. So that's why we're sitting here in March going through the results of the audit. The audit was a clean audit, clean opinions on the audit, so no modifications to that, no letters of recommendation that came along with the audit, and there were no findings related to the federal audit. So our objective in doing the audit, we don't look at every transaction. We test your controls, your processes, for being able to put together your financial numbers. So we help to put the report together, but management takes full responsibility for the information that's in those reports. Our opinion on the financial statements is the only part of the audit report that we take responsibility for, that we own. So we spend a lot of time testing the information, but really the only part that we own is our audit opinion. We follow auditing standards, not just regular auditing standards, but government auditing standards, which hold you to a higher level of scrutiny. This was, fiscal year 21 was one of the first years in several years that you actually had to have a single audit. So anytime the town spends over $750,000 in federal grants in 1 year, it raises you to having to have a separate report issued on, it's your, all your federal expenditures are in one report, and we have to do compliance testing. So there's an additional level of testing that's done. Last year it was the CARES, so it's COVID related, it was all related to the CARES grant. We anticipate for the next couple of years that you're gonna have to do the same thing, right? So there's more federal money coming into the town, ARPA money coming down. I know there's some firefighter money that came into the town. So the COVID related response really has impacted your need to have a federal audit. So again, our responsibility is under generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards, so 2 levels of review that we're going through, and management's responsible for the preparation and the review of the report. So once we do our thing and put a draft report together, based on all of the records that the town has provided to us, we give it back to your finance department, your finance team. They go through the process of understanding it all, making sure that they agree with it, and they accept it and take responsibility for it. Again, the results are unmodified. There was no non-compliance related to our testing of the CARES funds. That was the grant that we selected this year for major testing. And your report it's not just your basic financial statements. You actually do an annual comprehensive report, which is submitted to the Government Finance Officers Association for an award in financial reporting. You did get the reward for your 2020 ACFR. This report was also submitted, and it's in the review process now to get another award for excellence in financial reporting. So the report itself is a 123-page. We're not going to walk through the whole thing, but it's a 123-page report. Starts with an introductory section, management's transmittal, which is like the introduction to the whole report. That is not an audited part. It's something that management provides to somebody reading the report to give you the to talk a little bit about the town and the operations of the town and your financial policies. That is followed by the financial section. The financial section starts with our audit opinion. That's pages 13 and 14. Again, it's a 2-page opinion. That's where we tell you what we did and give you our unmodified or clean audit opinion on the financial statements. You have management's discussion and analysis, which is like the Cliff Notes. That's the explanation of why numbers in your financial statements went up and/or went down throughout the year. And then the financial statements and the notes to the financial statements only take up really pages 25 to 74 of that report. That's what we're auditing, that's what we're giving our opinion on. And then there's what we call RSI, or Required Supplementary Information. That gives you your budget to actual, some trend information on your long-term large liabilities, so your retirement system liabilities and your OPEB liability. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but those are the two big liabilities that are impacting every municipality's financial statements. And because you're doing a more comprehensive report, you have other supplementary information or combining schedules that allow readers of this report to drill down to see what's in all of those other columns in the financial statements. And finally, your stat section or statistical section gives you 10 years worth of history of your financial numbers.
Please continue.
Okay. Your financial numbers, some economic trends, some debt trends, and some capital and operating indicators for the town. So some highlights about the financial statements. The MD&A, or Management's Discussion and Analysis, that summarizes the results of operations. Your general fund, right, that's the chief operating fund for the town. The general fund, that's what town meeting is voting for your budget. We really want to look at your ability to comply with what town meeting votes, that you have a budget, that your revenues are going to be managed well, that you're going to be generating an adequate enough of reserves, that you have controls to make sure you're spending money within the categories that town meeting approves, that you have a system to stop people from overspending, and that's all shown in the budget to actual report. So you had about $72 million general fund operating budget, including amounts that were carried over from the prior year. You budgeted to use about $1.8 million in free cash or your reserves to balance that budget for '21. And it was a positive result. So your revenues came in $4.9 million over what general fund budgeted. That all leads back into free cash for the next fiscal year. So that you took in more, so it's conservative budgeting or good collections. You end up, that comes back in and is available to the town to appropriate in the next fiscal year. Expenditures and encumbrances were under what you budgeted by $2.8 million. Same thing. That all leads to your positive general fund results. On a budgetary basis, the general fund increased by $4.6 million during fiscal year '21, bringing your total general fund balance to over $17 million. That number includes your stabilization fund or your rainy day fund of about $4.3 million. Other than the general fund, the town also has a CPA fund. You have voted to allow for a surcharge to be charged on the tax rate to help community preservation. And for doing that, you get money from the state, a matching grant from the state trust fund. That fund had about a $5.6 million. Again, it's available to the town. It's a really good way to be able to help community preservation, so historic preservation, increase open space, affordable housing. So there's specific uses for it, but it really does provide flexibility for the town. There's a 3% surcharge that the town has approved. That's an option by community. And the revenue in that fund included $1.6 million in that tax surcharge, and state matching funds were $506,000 for the year. Another major fund that shows up separately on your fund-based financial statements is the capital fund. The capital fund, I just like to point out, does have a deficit balance at the end of the year of $18.6 million. The only reason for that, that's how you're accounting for your big capital wastewater projects. And the only reason you see a deficit balance is because you've temporarily financed that. So you're using temporary Mass Clean Water Trust notes to be able to finance that. Once those notes go long-term, the deficit just goes away. So that's a normal way of operating and managing that trust fund. Again, it's shown separately because it's such a large amount. The short-term bans or outstanding notes were over $20 million at the end of the year. Most of that all related to wastewater. The town does use enterprise funds or like a business-type activity to account for your water enterprise fund and your wastewater fund. So those are not shown in with the governmental funds. You keep track of those separately. The water enterprise had an increase in net position, small, $287,000. You really are setting your rates to be able to recover those costs throughout the year, so that's expected. Same with wastewater, it increased by just $81,000, and that's expected. Finally, you have another set of financial statements for your fiduciary funds. Fiduciary funds are not only used for your scholarships or your private purpose funds that are not to benefit the regular government, that benefit individuals, but you're setting money aside to help fund your OPEB liability. So OPEB and your pension liabilities are the biggest liabilities for the town. OPEB is not something required by law at this point to be funded. You have to measure it, and if you set funds aside in a trust fund, which the town is now doing, it allows you to bring your liability down and to put money aside to pay future benefits. So OPEB, for anyone who's not familiar with the term, is other post-employment benefits, and that's really the town's commitment to pay for health insurance once people retire from the town. So it's a big liability. The trust fund now has, you put in $50,000 in fiscal year '21. You had investment income. Those funds are invested, so over $647,000 for a total fund balance of over $4 million at the end of the year. So that really does help to bring the liability down. And it's money that's still just set aside. So it's still town money, still available to you, but only for that one purpose. And just to talk about those liabilities, again, the OPEB, the total unfunded liability is over $36 million at the end of the year. For governmental funds, $2.5 million for those enterprise funds. It's reported in your financial statements. It's not something that you have to pay out, and you pay a certain amount, pay as you go, so you're paying those liabilities as they come due, but you're reporting the full liabilities in your financial statements. So that $36 million and $2 million number are the long-term actuarial liabilities for OPEB. The pension liability, similar, comes right from Barnstable County Retirement System. So you're shared in with Barnstable County. Your share of their liability is $29.2 million for governmental funds and $2 million for the business-type activities. Unlike OPEB, pension is required to be fully funded. So you're on a payment system with Barnstable County retirement system to get that number down. So part of your assessment to them that you're paying through the general fund every year goes towards paying down that liability. There is, because those numbers are so big, accounting standards require you to have 10 years. The footnotes are pretty significant related to those liabilities, and there's 10-year trend schedules in the back of the report that will show you how the liabilities are going up or going down over time as you're paying into them. Some other financial highlights, the town's debt was $23.8 million. And usually what you want to be able to see at the end of the year is how much your debt service or what you're paying for debt is impacting your ability to provide other services. You want to watch that number. You want to make sure that you are, not kind of all over the place, but you keep it at a level amount of your general fund budget, that it's not becoming such a burden on the general fund budget that it would impact other services. So your governmental debt right now is 5.9% of general fund budget. Very, very reasonable. Usually the rating agencies don't want that to go over 10% ever of your operating budget, so 5.9 is a very reasonable number. We like to watch that. Your water enterprise had $5.7 million worth of debt, so that's not impacting the general fund. And again, we talked about the short-term debt for your capital going through Mass Clean Water Trust. And I mentioned earlier that you this year were required to have a single audit or an audit of your federal grants. Again, for this year it was COVID-19, the Coronavirus Relief Fund, or we call it the CARES Fund, that we audited. In total, the town spent $1.2 million on federal grants. Of that, $664,000 was on the CARES Fund. Also, you had $446 in your Assistance to Firefighters Fund. So those all went up this year. Our testing of the Coronavirus Relief Fund did not show we didn't have any findings or question costs. And that, we're testing, it's almost like agreed upon procedures. They give us a compliance supplement, tell us how you're supposed to report and spend the money, and we do very specific drill down testing of that grant. So the results of the single audit, again, were clean. We give 2 different audit opinions on those numbers in that report. There were no findings. They were all unmodified audit opinions, so good audit results. And again, just want to go through our role here and management's role. Management is responsible for the presentation of the financial statements and that report. We do help to put it together, but management understands it, takes full responsibility for it. Management in the town is responsible for establishing effective internal controls and for financial reporting throughout the year, not just when we're coming in to do the audit, and making sure that the town complies with laws and regulations, making sure that you're staying within your voted budget, that even as rules change, that they keep up with all the Mass General laws related to financial reporting, and that they're setting their internal control systems to comply with those laws, and that they have properly recorded all the town's assets, that they're reconciling the numbers, cash, the debt, the treasurer's office to the accounting office, that all of their numbers are in balance throughout the year and that they're reconciled. Our responsibilities as your auditors are to express opinions on the financial statements. We've talked about that. They were clean opinions. To follow accounting standards, both generally accepted accounting standards and government or Yellow Book auditing standards, and making sure that we understand the internal controls that are going on here in the town. So I mentioned we come out before the end of the year. That's when we're talking to people or calling people, as it may be, to make sure we know if you've changed anything. Did you change any systems throughout the year? Is there anything going on? We actually review your minutes to your meetings to make sure we know if there's anything going on that's going to impact the numbers here in your audit. Making sure that you, as a committee, that we're reporting back to you, that we're making sure that you are charged with management, that you understand our role in doing the audit. And, with respect to reporting to you, make sure that if there's anything that comes to our attention that has to be, internal control related, that we're reporting directly to you. Again, there was nothing to report related to that. We always have different areas of audit emphasis that come up. Of course, COVID-19 has impacted that. We've had to take a look at what may be done differently. So if we're not coming down here as much as we did before because of different things going on related to COVID, is there risk related to that, and how can we mitigate that? A lot of communities have started collecting more money electronically and or paying more bills electronically just in response to the pandemic. That can lead to risk, right? There's more risk that things could go on. Cybersecurity is big. I feel like we've been talking about that for a long time. It's a problem. It's real. I'm not an IT professional, but we know that there's risk that things could go wrong, and they have been targeting municipalities. So we want to make sure that the town has a good process in place to mitigate that risk to the best of your ability. Certainly that's been a focus for us throughout the audit. Making sure that we know that any technology systems that you have that may be changing, that we understand what those internal controls are, and that if there are any suggestions that we have, that we're talking to you about that throughout the year. We also need to focus on making sure that your financial statements are in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles. Our auditing standards are changed throughout time, and there's new GASB requirements or accounting standards requirements that come into play every year. So one of the things that changes from year to year is new accounting standards. We really focus on making sure that that's a change, that the town knows about the new standards, and that you're set up to implement them timely. So again, it was a clean audit. I know you're going into the next fiscal year. We're here to talk about 21. It's a pretty big report. I'm happy to take any specific questions related to the reports that are in front of you. And just want to thank the town. Again, you do a very good job. We're here early. We're here by the end of August doing most of this work. And it's a process to get to this point, sometime in March. We understand that. But if there's any questions, happy to take them.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I had to take off for a
That's
few
okay.
minutes. Questions from the board, Larry?
Thank you for the report. I'd like to start off by thanking Carol Coppola and the finance team for putting together such a great job. And then I have, which we expect of her, by the way, so she's done it for years.
We do
for 2
too.
years. Let me ask you, subject that comes up for us, it seems like more often than I care to admit, is revolving funds. Do you have a sense, do we have too many revolving funds? How do we compare with other towns? Do you have any idea of that?
I do, and we've looked at those. So your revolving funds actually in the financial statements are in a column called non-major governmental funds, right? So that for GAAP reporting, they kind of get combined into one column. Because you do a comprehensive report, they're broken out in the back, you don't have an excessive amount compared to other, right? So this is what we do. We look at other communities, the activity that's in them, we understand that you've been focused on that a lot. We do spend some time breaking them out and checking to make sure there's nothing unusual. Again, we don't look at every transaction. The town's supposed to have a system of internal controls to look at every transaction, but they're not excessive. There's nothing in there. What we do look for with revolving funds to make sure there's not a lot of, I'm going to say unused, like that there's not a lot of old balances that are significant that maybe need to be closed out. We haven't found any misuse, and they don't appear excessive to us.
Thank you. Briefly, can you let us know, what's the criteria for the reward that we got last year and is in the process this year?
You mean the federal awards?
Right.
So for audit purposes, any year that you spend over $750,000, you're raised to the level of needing a single audit. So a single audit means you get that separate report that has all of your federal expenditures. So anytime your expenditures are over $750,000, single audit comes into play. This is the first year in the past, I think we looked at a couple of years.
2016 was the
Let me
last.
restate my question.
Okay.
My question was, you mentioned we had a reward for last year's, and I was wondering just what,
You mean the-
for the annual conference report.
Yes.
And I was wondering what went into that? Why did we get that?
Okay, so you do a comprehensive report. So your report is more than is required under GAAP. So you do a more significant report. You send that report into the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association has an award program that you apply to. You apply to that, it actually goes out to 3 different reviewers in 3 different states, so nobody in Massachusetts. It goes to 3 different states, and they review your report for compliance with, there's a significant process that they go through to make sure the report, it's not financial position, it's not how much money you have in the bank, it's your compliance with reporting.
So it's a big deal.
Big deal. It's a big deal.
Thank you.
Is that Larry?
I am.
Mary?
No, just thank you. It's always good to have positive results, and I do credit Carol Coppola for just doing a stellar job, and your audit just reinforces that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Julie?
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, Carol got us that award, so thank you, Carol, as usual. I just had a couple questions. In terms of the federal audit that you just did, and now it's closed out, we adhere to everything. Is there any chance that we have to revisit that at any point, or are we done with that? I mean, I know what we may next year for the next amount of money, but is that in our past?
So-
We're done?
Our report is final and issued. We don't test 100% of anything. The CARES Act actually went through A&F at the state. Could they still come back and say, we're questioning something and we want you to, they can do whatever they want, and we don't control that. We did do compliance testing. We take a look at your expenditures and we select certain things that we think look as we try to find the things that we think could get you in trouble. We didn't have any issue with the way you spent the money, so I would be surprised. I will say with the CARES Act, though, they have the right to come back and ask for more information from you, so I can't tell you that that could never happen.
Yeah, and I only ask that because I imagine it's a pretty intensive process, and, our finance director has so much already that that's just another undertaking, so I'm just curious as to how much they can come
Yeah,
back on
I mean,
that
it's
stuff.
been a real challenge with these new grants because the rules have changed, right? When the money first came out, there was one set of rules. It has changed throughout. I know especially with the FEMA money that came out, there were 3 different stages of different things that you could spend that money on. It's sort of a moving target. We don't actually get our final guidance on the federal, when did the compliance supplement came out? I think it was like December? Like,
Yeah,
so
December.
it's like, after you've spent the money, we get our guidance on how to audit that. So it's changing, and now, coming down the road is ARPA, right? So the new big federal money, sort of post-COVID, is the ARPA money that's coming down. And the final rule on how you can spend that is over 400 pages long. So it's pretty significant. So we think you're fine, but I can't say that you could never have questions from a federal or state agency related to that.
No, thank you, and you did just answer one of my other questions, which was what type of notification do you get when they change these things, but you don't get a lot.
You don't get a lot. You really have to keep up with it. And what Harwich does, which has always been really good, is I'm going to say stay in the black. You don't have a lot of gray areas of spending, right? There are some people that sort of push the envelope a little bit, and then we have no control if somebody comes back and wants that money if you didn't comply. If it's dead on allowable, then that's your best bet.
Okay, and it was good to hear that you didn't have any issues with our IT in terms of, as you say, more and more online payments, et cetera.
That is, nobody's perfect. It can, even with our IT people, they say, you have to keep up with things. We've had clients, Massachusetts cities and towns, that have had issues with cybersecurity breaches, and you really just have to keep up with it. There's no guarantee there. We do our best to take a look at what you have going on. I know the town, has had some even changes in your IT process, but there's no guarantee there. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I have nothing to add. I would just echo my colleagues' comments and thank Carol and the finance team, and thank you for the audit. Great work. And to the public, this will be on the website, hopefully tomorrow, if it's not already on the website now.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it. Thanks for coming. All right, John, do you want to call your meeting to order? And I would do it by roll call vote after you call and get a second.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. My name's John Shorey, Chair of the Finance Committee, and I'd like to open our meeting, joint meeting with the Selectmen tonight, to hear a presentation on the capital plan, the capital budget, 5-year capital plan. And I'd like to open the meeting. Give a second.
I second the motion.
Okay, meeting's been opened and seconded. Mark Amherst? Dan Torek? Mark Keller? Angelo? Dale?
Aye.
John? All present, and unanimous decision to open the meeting.
Excellent, thank you. Wait for capital outlay to come back up, and Rich, you can open your meeting. Because it's a hybrid, we do it by roll call vote. So after you move in second.
Hi, I'm Rich Larius, and I am the chairman of the Capital Outlay Committee. And I'd like to open our meeting. And we have a quorum. And let's start with you, John, if you would.
Pardon?
You are a member of our
Yes,
committee.
I am a member, yeah. I'm present.
Okay.
Bruce Nightingale, Vice Chairman of the Capital Outlay Committee.
And Martha Donovan, member of the committee.
We're good.
Welcome. Joe, do you want to introduce this, and then we'll...
Certainly, and Matt, are you able to launch the presentation? No, this would be the capital documents. Thank you. So, good evening, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Chairman. I don't get to say that often. So the agenda item that you all have this evening is a presentation and discussion of the capital outlay fiscal year 2023 budget presented by Capital Outlay Committee and me as town administrator to both the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee has an obligation under the charter to conduct a public hearing, and that public hearing has been noticed for Tuesday, March 22nd, March 24th, I apologize. Let me correct that again. The public hearing by the Finance Committee, March 24th, 6 or 6:30, John?
6:30.
6:30 here in the Griffin Room. So that'll be an opportunity for the public to be heard and for the public through the Finance Committee to ask questions as well. So I think it may help everybody if I throw out some words that I'm going to try and use consistently. Because as I think you all know, the capital outlay component of our charter is under amendment process. The amendment that's being finalized gets us to a vote at town meeting in 2019, where the intent of town meeting was to create a 5-year plan. As you know, that the motion and the materials at the 2019 did not accomplish that. So we have taken the effort to correct that, and council has weighed in that the town can proceed under that vote because it was the intent of town meeting in 2019. That vote will be finalized this year at the town election. Now, that relates to the plan. The capital outlay program consists of a plan and of a budget. The budget is for the current fiscal year. So for our purposes, we're talking about the capital outlay budget as proposed for fiscal year 2023. The Capital Outlay Committee met over several months, over several meetings, and has endorsed and voted all of the items that you see in the document outlined capital outlay plan budget for fiscal year 2023. I want to emphasize, Mr. Chairman, that they did so with the headwinds of COVID, with a good old regular seasonal flu, family matters, travel, and the like. And so that with the capital outlay consisting of representatives of the town administrator, the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, and Planning, we've had, or they've had, because I'm not a member, I just work with them, have had difficulty going through the process through no fault of their own, just really the way things have gone. And then lastly, I would just remind everybody that the Capital Outlay Committee also lost a stalwart on their committee when Joe McFarland passed away. As many of you knew, Joe served for many years on the planning board and served for many years as the planning board's representative to the Capital Outlay Committee. So sadly, this is the first process that we've gone through that we didn't have the benefit of Joe's humor, wit, and intelligence. And so that position still remains vacant as we try to work on a replacement, if there is such a thing, for Joe McFarland. So again, the words that we'll be talking about is the capital outlay program consists of a budget, which pertains to the current fiscal year that we're under discussion, so fiscal year 2023. It includes a plan for the remaining 4 out years, so that would be fiscal years 24 through 27. And the Capital Outlay Committee still needs to finalize that process. But Mr. Chairman, to keep the process going, we wanted to have this joint meeting tonight to dive into the budget matters. So what you'll see on the screen is also what everybody assembled here for the 3 public bodies should have in front of you. And those are the budget items proposed for fiscal year 2023 by department, by title of project, by funding source and dollar amount. And then you'll see at the bottom of that table, there's a recap of the funding sources that are presently proposed. The Capital Outlay Committee went through every item in that budget and voted on each item individually, and then voted on the overall budget. Every item was adopted by at least a majority vote, if not unanimous, and the overall budget was adopted by the Capital Outlay Committee unanimously. Furthermore, I just want to explain that with this program and trying to refine, as the town administrator, how we handle capital outlay program, I did rely upon information and forms that are provided by the Department of Revenue's Division of Local Services. And this is meant to represent what they consider to be best practices as it relates to capital planning. So in your packets, beyond the 2 pages that get to the budget and the plan, you should see a Word document sheet that talks about a list of statements found under the drop-down menus on the capital outlay request form, and then you'll see all of the capital outlay request forms that support requests for fiscal year 2023. I say that for several reasons. First, it's a handy form, but it's a form that we inherited from the state and cannot change. And I say that, and I'll take a sip of water so I don't mispronounce the word. But there is a typo embedded in the form that's been driving me crazy. And the typo relates to the asset category, and you can see that they are departmental equipment or machinery, rolling stock or vehicle, information technology, building improvements, land acquisition, feasibility study, design, construction, historical treasures, infrastructure. The form has it as infra, and the S is replaced with a C. I don't want to mispronounce that word that's misspelled, but I want you to know that when you review the forms, that was not an error made by the requestors. That's embedded within the document itself. And then, of course, they have the ever-present other. So aside from the asset category, the documents will identify priority. And again, according to best practices of the Department of Revenue, the priorities that they offer are: the top priority is this a capital request that is legally required? The second one is it essential? The third level is enhancement, and the fourth level is desirable. Going from memory, I would tell you that I do not believe that there are any requests for fiscal year '23 that are desirable. And I've told department heads and requestors, and the Capital Outlay Committee agreed that going forward, desirable is going to be a tough sell. Many of them, as you'll see, relate to either essential to the programs or our enhancements, which are considered to be essential to the program. And then last but not least, there is encoded within the form the purpose. And the purposes that the Department of Revenue Division of Local Service recognize are ensuring public safety, new equipment, replacement of equipment, service enhancement, increasing efficiency, compliance with a law or mandate, a service restoration related to post-emergency, and again, other. And so what you'll then see in the packet are the request forms that were submitted by the requestors, and these were the forms, as well as the testimony of the requesters, that the Capital Outlay Committee relied upon. And we can certainly refer back to these as you get into your deliberations and your questions to both Capital Outlay Committee and myself. And so, well, sorry, one more item. What you do not have factored into the budget, and what the Capital Outlay Committee has not yet been presented, was the matter that the board took up, the Board of Selectmen took up at a meeting before, was a request of the Board of Wastewater Commissioners, and it relates to a new request. It's a request for fiscal year 2023. It is not a request that's had an opportunity to be vetted by the Capital Outlay, and therefore is not presented as part of the materials. But again, the board wanted to be aware of it, and the form is contained within the packet that you have. So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, that was meant to be my brief introduction. To you, Mr. Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, you may want to call upon your colleague, the Chair of the Capital Outlay Committee, Mr. Larios.
Mr. Larios.
Yes, sir. Are there any questions?
Anything to add?
I have some personal stuff that I think is very important that is not numeric. It doesn't appear on any of these spreadsheets. Although this is a great way to present it, you've had a chance, luckily, to at least have in your possession the requester's request. Okay? And we've gone through. It's very difficult, especially this time. All the past years, we've actually sat down, and the people have come in, and we try to hit as many as we can on a certain day so that we can complete all the requests. The plan and the budget is part of the plan. The plan itself, when it's voted in, is still subject to change until town meeting. So even we've had opportunities in the past, we've changed during the break before town meeting to make sure the numbers changed. So I just want to let you know, in case you're, if you're new, even if you're old like me, you still have an issue with subject to change. The other thing that we have not addressed, at least this committee has never addressed, is if you have an opportunity, and you do now, the 4 years out past the budget are conceived by the requester. They're put in there. Many years ago, we called them a placeholder, and we voted the plan. Bless you. And the problem that we're gonna have in the future is that if there's a change in '24, when we meet in '24, on any number that is in an out year today, it's gonna take 2/3 vote at town meeting to change that number. And that means if you went from 18,000 to 18,001, it takes 2/3 of the people in that room to allow it to happen. It's almost impossible if you look at all the numbers and the possibilities of change. And also where there's a 0 and you're changing 0 to another number. That's very difficult if you think about it. So it's trying to estimate what the cost of your house is, and you say, well, in 2 years from now, I want to put a roof on, and it's $10,000. And I put that into my bank, because the bank wants to know, what's your future spendings. And now you find out it's 11,000. And the bank says, well, no, you said it was 10, or whatever the number is. So I just open that up to you. I don't know how to deal with it. It's beyond my pay grade. Okay?
Run by the charter.
I understand. I'm not saying anything about that. I sort of know who initiated. We were never invited to have any opportunity to have input to any changes to the capital plan. So I just opened that up to you. I got it off my chest. We're good. Any questions, please?
Sure. Larry?
Yeah, I have none at this time. I know, I'm a liaison to the capital outlay, and they work these numbers very, in great detail and, long discussion, so, good work. I think it'd be nicer to have some more discussion, department heads, I agree with you, to better understand, but you did the best you could, and, through your work.
Thank you.
Mary?
The good news when I initially looked at this is you had everything pretty much funded for this year. So that kind of cheered me up. And then most of them, other than 1 or 2, were under the essential category. So there were just a few that were desirable. So then I said, well, should we really do those? But then I look out at next year with 44 million, and I don't know how we're gonna do 44 million, so.
Karen, if I can, I think some of the desirable ones had a revenue source. It was like if I remember right, it was like the community center that was looking to replace equipment in the gym, and they have gym fees to use toward that purpose.
From their rolling fund, right.
We're kind of hoping that the federal government is going to help pay some of that 40 million,
Or a lot of it.
or almost all of it.
Good, I'm with
Mary,
you
I'm
there.
glad you brought it up, because that 44 million, if you start looking at the numbers in that column is subject to more change than any other year. You go from 44, almost 45, to 19, to 5, to 6.
Yeah.
We're in almost the base year in '23 at 3 million.
Right.
And now you're looking at going up 44 million. And the numbers there are guesstimates. That's all I can say, are guesstimates. Next year, town meeting, that's where the rubber meets the road about this charter change.
Right. So I have no further questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Julie?
No, I appreciate this, a lot of work and a lot of numbers, and I was saying, my head was spinning last night looking at all these numbers again. Whatever we can do to look hard at collectively, all of us, because we have a lot of vehicles on here, and I get that some are really needed, but I guess as a board, I'm just hoping that we're able to really look at this and figure out how we alleviate some of the pressure that we're under, so I don't really have anything more than that to say.
We have several meetings coming up to try and alleviate some of the pressure. I'm not gonna dive into it tonight, but I would agree with Julie, there's an awful lot of vehicles on here. Police department in their operating budget has 3 police cruisers on top of this, and town administrators putting a stat together on how many vehicles we have so the board can absorb that. I know you've vetted the fence, and I don't see Eric or anyone here. I'm not sure Caroline can speak on that. I had a question about the fence. I think I'll probably reserve these for our next meeting when we talk about the content of this.
Certainly.
But-
I do stand ready to answer many questions and can speak to the fence if that's an immediate question.
That's an immediate question.
So it's a request from our facilities manager. It is an item that has been pushed off for at least the last 2 years because of the headwinds of COVID and not knowing where and when and how town meeting was going to be. It's referred to as a privacy fence, and it's for the benefit of the neighbors that abut the ball fields behind the community center. And so the fence itself is ending its useful life. And so the town, through facilities, has in years past made a commitment to replace it. So it's meant to be for the privacy of the neighbors and for the benefit of them.
Thank you. Next is on the one of the piece of fire equipment, and maybe Chief LeBlanc can answer this question. And I'm gonna have to ask that we make room for the chief and anyone else that wants to speak at the table and slide the mic down. Earlier, I got a message that people couldn't hear us from the people that were speaking at the podium. They can hear from the mics at the tables, but they can't hear
No problem.
from the podium with no mic and loud voices.
sure?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm not afraid of you.
I'm not afraid of you either.
Plenty of room.
Since neither one of you are afraid, will you slide the mic to him? Thank you.
Okay.
Chief, the $450,000, which I think is a forestry truck, is that the request?
So this is actually a couple things. We currently have 2 forestry trucks. One of them is a 2005 F-250. It was originally the dog catcher's pickup. We took it, modified it, put a skid unit on the back of it. Last week, we replaced the gas tank in it because the straps rotted out and it fell to the ground. And then the other one is the truck that former Chief Clark and I were able to cobble together. It's an old military chassis. We got a tank and a pump from Mashpee. So the two of them together are both antiquated, outdated, and they're good forestry vehicles. You know, if we small brush fires, what we saw an opportunity was to get rid of both of them and buy one truck that would actually classify as a small pumper. So essentially the same capacity as our normal fire trucks on an F-550 chassis, same water, everything else, almost the same capability. So it gives us a lot more ability, especially with going down to 3 pumpers with the Quint, opportunity to get into tighter areas. Some of the, streets like I use like Green Needle and Pine Needle off Lower County. Those are tight even for the engines to get in. And, it reduces the fleet. So it's what my goal has been since I've been involved in it is to try and make the fleet more efficient and more effective. So again, we're getting rid of 2 trucks down to 1 truck that has all the same capabilities of what we have, plus enhances that ability.
Thank you, Chief. Going back a couple of years before we just bought the Quint, what was the vehicle that we bought that was specific to forest work?
So we have the last engine we bought isn't specific to it. It's a combination. It's called an urban interface. It's a 4-wheel drive engine. It was to replace an engine. We bought that for a couple reasons. One, it was a less expensive option than replacing our normal engines, Class A. At the time, the town administrator put some pressure on the fire department to reduce capital outlay expenses. And it was also something we saw with flooding and snow as an opportunity to enhance our abilities to meet that need. But it's not what we're looking at doing with this opportunity.
Okay. And given the amount of, and maybe I'm saying it wrong, brush fires that we have, given what we have, given the towns around us, what do they have for forestry vehicles that we could use in place of replacing this at $450,000?
So everybody's typically got one, some small forestry. Again, the part of the plan with this is giving us more capability than just, if it was just a brush fire issue, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It gives us another pumper, so to speak. It's 500 gallons of water, our forestry has 2.
Okay.
So it's really trying to enhance that capability and make the fleet smaller at the same time.
Thank you, David.
Yep.
Chief, appreciate it. Any questions for the chief from board members?
None.
No.
Okay.
Sure, Michael, thank you. I'd like to entertain questions from the board up here. Why don't we start with Dan Torak down the end there? Any questions, Dan?
No, I think he answered the question that I was gonna ask, which was what goes into the decision to replace things like vehicles and police cruisers and that kind of thing?
So,
I think I heard.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of
in this decision, because it's a change from what we have, a little bit of a change of platform, there's a couple of things, trying to think outside the box. Wear and tear, maintenance, and everything else. I mean, the DPW does an outstanding job of maintaining our fleet, but we get to a point when we're sending vehicles up to them for a lot of maintenance that you have to start. So age, mileage, wear and tear, and unfortunately with some of the vehicles, like the military truck, just sitting around, it deteriorates as it sits. So that was always kind of a short-term solution, and both of those vehicles are on the capital plan in out years to be replaced. So we're just trying to combine them again, kind of do what we did with the Quint, combine two vehicles and make it smaller and get rid of stuff down the road.
Gotcha, thank you.
You're welcome.
No
Mark
questions.
Keller?
No questions.
Karen Doucette?
No, normally you'd look at this and say, what can we potentially push? But who wants to push it onto what we have going next year? So I don't have any questions on that.
Okay, that's a good point.
No, I
We'll
mean-
skip 2 years.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know you.
Angelo?
I think next year is a real question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Since
big
they
enough.
require 2/3 vote, excuse me. Have everybody gone through this and made sure it's the lowest number you can get? Because when you go up to, what's it, $40 million, right, it's kind of tough.
If Angelo doesn't have a mic, will you slide it
Oh.
down a little
I'm
bit?
sorry.
Thanks.
I'm sorry. So actually, have you gone through the numbers for next year and seen any way to get them lower? Because that's a very difficult problem we're dealing with. We're moving from $3 million to $44 million in this one line. And if you're going to have to vote on 2/3, it's going to be a real problem. So I think you need to take the best shot. And that may very well be your answer. That's it.
Well, Angela, that's what I brought up before.
I know, but
You have a number like 44. Is it really 44? Is it 42? Is it 46? The analysis of that has not been as scrupulous as the budget number, because the budget number is the impact to us as we go into town meeting today. The issue of 44 is going to be looked at much more during the year. Hopefully, we can meet more than we did, and you were on this committee. The calendar really starts for us in September. Well, it didn't this year. We go from September to, I think, part of the road, or the route that we take is we come and present in January, this kind of, affair where we all talk about it. So we're 3 months past that. We started 3 months later, so we're going to we'll have to look at that number and really dissect it much more. But majority of that is water, and they don't know. So
it's just a real problem.
it's a real, and it's going to be a real problem at town meeting next year, and the year after, and the year after.
Agreed.
Any other questions, Angelo?
No, I'm
Dale?
sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I can appreciate that. It sounds like the vehicles you're trying to retire are in pretty tough shape. Do you know what the life expectancy of this new vehicle might be?
Typically for engines, we'd use 20 years. I would think that would be reasonable for this. They're kept inside, they're well-maintained, that's usually not a problem. Wear and tear, just a little bit depends on use, but that would be the goal, would be trying to get 20 years out of it.
20 years, that's
Yep.
great. Thank you.
Again, my name's John Chory, and I am on the Capital Budgets Committee, and I did know these numbers beforehand, and I knew the numbers going forward for the 5-year plan, even though they haven't been approved yet by our committee. I did know the number was going to be there. And I'd just like to speak to that and tie into the operating budget, because I feel it's very, very important. We have a 5-year budget plan now of close to $80 million. Some of those items on that capital budget plan are going to be sought for that. I mean, this year we have the fully funded through free cash mostly, and the funding sources have been identified for this year, so we're fine. But the next 4 years, no funding sources have been sought yet. And some of the bigger numbers, a funding source, I'm guessing, will be sought through debt override, which means basically borrowing, paying principal and interest for whatever amount of years that we determine to pay off that debt. So you're looking at least an $80 million capital budget, probably more with interest on those principals that we borrow. So if you have that $80 million in your mind, and this year we're looking at an town operating budget of close to $82 million when you factor in all the budgets that make up the operating budget. The operating budget is the operating budget of the town and its services. The 2 schools' budgets are in there. The Water Enterprise Fund is in there, and the Water Fund is in there. And also in that is the CPC articles, which total close to $2.3 million. And then you have warrant articles. And there's a discussion later on about warrant articles. And I have not seen any numbers associated with those warrant articles. But when you add up all those numbers, you know, we're close to an $80 million operating budget this year. And so if you extrapolate that $80 million out 5 more years, you're at $400 million operating budget. Add on the $80 million of capital, add on principal and interest on the debt exclusions, you're looking at $500 million of monies over a 5-year period for a town of 13,000 people. I don't know what that all means, but those are real numbers. And this town has to look at those numbers and decide this year, I think, what we're going to start spending money on. Now, there's some warrant articles that are proposed. There's some budget, there's some other operating expenses that are proposed. And we're going through the process right now. So I think it's very important if we I'm going to keep my eyes on that $500 million for 5 years and look at numbers and look at warrant articles and then vote accordingly. So that's all I have to say there. It's a plan, it's a good plan, and town needs these services. But at some point, we all have to ask ourselves, do we want these services or do we need these services? And that's up to town meeting, which is a very good way to do it. So I encourage people that are listening, you know, to come to our meetings. We have a pretty good-sized group in this meeting room tonight that I hope will get up and voice their concerns on these budgets, either pro or against. And I also encourage people to get involved, you know, with these budgets. And that's all I have to say on that. But remember that number, $500 million over 5 years. But it's a good plan. We've spent many hours researching it and deliberating. But ultimately, again, it's up to the townspeople to decide whether they want to do these numbers or not. So thank you. And Michael?
Thank you, John. Before I call on the public, Joe Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, the purpose of this evening is to focus on the budget for fiscal year '23. As the chairman of Capital Outlay and I have said, the Capital Outlay will be meeting again to talk about the 4-year, the out years on the plan. If we're going to look at the plan tonight very briefly, I would just say that when you look at fiscal year 2024, 40 million of the 44 million is water, wastewater. And so I'm not aware that in years past, the town has looked at capital outlay plans and programs and factored in that that's the entire capital outlay. So if we set that aside for a moment, we're looking at capital outlays this year of roughly 3.8 million, next year of just over 4 million draft as it relates to capital unrelated to water, wastewater. And then as you can see in the outlying years, it creeps up, but these are not final numbers. So again, the purpose for the discussion this evening is on fiscal year 2023, and the chief went away before I could outline his point, because I don't know that we've heard it yet, but specifically to what Chief LeBlanc was just talking about, the mini pumper. The request is for $450,000, because that's the estimated cost of that vehicle and equipment. But as you see in the chief's application, the town is seeking a grant and may be able to acquire the grant. And if we achieve that grant, it reduces the $450,000 cost to the town down to $22,500. And so what we didn't want to do, when I say we, it's not the royal we, it's the chief and I, what we didn't want to do is put in the lower number and say, nothing to see here, give us that amount. And so that's something else I want to emphasize, that if you look at the plan in future years, what we have not factored in are grants that the town is or may be seeking. And to the earlier point, if you look at the plan, there is funding for every single element on that plan for every single year. So it is not that they're not funded, that there is an anticipated funding source for everything on the 5-year plan. Chief, did I misspeak anything with the grant? Thank you.
And Joe, specifically, community center grant boiler, green community. That 437,400, we already have an offsetting grant, as long as this is approved, of about 165,000?
Correct.
Thank you.
That this is what it costs the town to do those programs. If the town doesn't commit to those programs, we get bounced from the Green Communities program. So that's one of the items that you have to put in the full accounting and the cost, but in the end, there'll be a benefit to the town.
So the commitment's already there, as long as town meeting makes the commitment.
That's my understanding of the
Two
program.
things that we
Correct.
just spoke of.
Correct.
You know, I think it would be very helpful for the voters to see that, Joe, what grants and what offsets they are, because your comments are spot on, and I know on the $30 million wastewater, we put that in as quick as we could put that in, knowing that federal infrastructure money was coming down the pipeline, and we wanted to have a shovel-ready project. So to speak about the 30 million like it's reality out of the taxpayers' pockets is really a disservice. Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, Michael, we heard the two ladies, the accountants, speak before, and they really highlighted the difference between corporate accounting and municipal accounting, okay? We're working under an environment that we have a legal responsibility, a regulatory responsibility to the state and to the federal government. So, John, I understand what you say about how you're compounding these numbers. But the issue is, if you want to stay as a town of Harwich and not be penalized, these numbers are real.
Yeah,
Now,
well,
I
they're
can
very
say,
real.
I agree, there should be controls. And those ladies spoke about the controls. She said that we're doing a good job of controlling what we can control. But the issue is, you've got to control what you can control. And some of the issues of why these numbers grow so quickly and the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen, the advice given by the Finance Committee, the advice given by the Capital Outlay Committee, we present to you. You're the decision makers, he's the manipulator to get the numbers so you can.
Add that to my resume.
That's not
Okay.
an audit word, no.
So you can get the numbers.
I know what you mean.
Okay? Look, what I'm saying is, we all have a part in this, but there's a legal responsibility, and we just have to, and a fiduciary, and we just have to take that into account when we see these numbers.
And the only organization you missed was Conservation Law Foundation
Right.
and the lawsuit. That's a big one.
I'm from Jersey, so we don't work.
Go ahead.
I think there may be, to Rich's point at the beginning about how this long-term five-year capital budget is going to be put forward, there may be an unintended consequence here, because it may behoove department heads to put in a higher number in the out years, knowing that it takes a two-thirds vote
Right.
to reduce it. So that can be problematic. It's why they call it budgets and planning, right? The plans are forward-looking, they change. Budgets are put into the year, and people are measured against their performance against a budget. So in my mind, it's all a budget, the way it's being contemplated here. And you're gonna get some pretty wonky numbers, I think, if that's the way we move forward with that.
I think there was several things that weren't contemplated. Certainly a future conversation for this board and a future town meeting. Joe?
Just to what, and this is Martha Donovan, the Board of Selectmen's representative to Capital Outlay, so thank you, Martha. One of our newest members. The other member is Bob Bosworth. He has a work commitment, couldn't make it tonight. But to Martha's point, I've been relying upon information from the Division of Local Services in the short term, because the Department of Revenue has best practices. And so we're trying to introduce the form, and in the future, I'd like to introduce the overall concept of how the Department of Revenue suggests we rebuild our capital outlay program. And in fact, that's not even the official word they use. But our charter has errors in it, as we know, and that we've tried to correct, which relates to the capital outlay program. But I think it's high time for the town to revisit that, and I would stand ready to present what the Department of Revenue recommends. It's not a major overhaul, but because it's in our charter, it takes two successive years to get it done. And we simply didn't have the bandwidth to start that for this year. As you already heard the chairman talk about what we're up against as far as meeting schedules. But it's a very real presence. There is a sword of Damocles hanging over the plan because of that two-thirds vote. And I want to be clear, when you read the charter, it says that any part of the plan is amended, it requires a 2/3 vote. So that can introduce scrivener's errors or anything else. And it just puts a greater burden on the capital plan that didn't exist in years prior. And it's also a greater burden that the town's walking away from. We now see certain zoning requirements that now take a straight majority. We're going in the opposite direction and making it a supermajority. And that's going to have a chilling effect. And I think Martha is spot on with regard to why the requests may look the way they do. Better to get it in and in the plan and not have to deal with a 2/3 vote to do otherwise. So there's a lot of moving parts that I think talk about unintended consequences that were born out of an effort in 2019, and I get it, I don't want to revisit it. I understand the frustration that folks had, but for me, you don't want to use your charter as a weapon, and I think that's part of what happened.
Thank you, Joe.
I would say, though, this is enlightening if you're a taxpayer to look at it, to know, even though we all know these numbers may not actually happen the way they're going to happen, but the trend and the work that we want to do in the town is reflected in these numbers. So I do think it's a great tool for townspeople to see.
Thank you. And Rich?
Michael, I just want to thank the board for selecting Martha to be on our.
Thank you.
She's a real asset.
You'll get tired of me soon.
Thank you. John, go ahead.
Thank you, Michael. Mark Ramirez just stepped back to the board. Mark, do you have any questions on the capital plan?
No specific questions.
Okay, thank you. We're done.
Okay. And I know one other topic to revisit is the timeline. Chair of the Finance Committee and I have talked, and how much time we have to work on this on their side is really not sufficient. So we find ourselves up against it every year and rushing to get things done. So anyone in the public? And actually, before I go to the public, do we want to have the water wastewater superintendent present anything tonight?
Yes, I think it would be beneficial for our superintendent to speak of the proposal, and as he approaches and we make room and.
Because we have to get this done sooner than later.
Correct, and this is something that the Capital Outlay Committee is hearing for the first time as well.
Okay.
They're not in a position to take any action tonight, but it's part of the discussion of the budget, because what they're proposing relates to the fiscal year 2023, and it has a funding source, and the funding source is separate and distinct from free cash, which I know is also a concern.
So Dan, will you tell them what you're doing, why, and stress the urgency of getting this voted by them sooner than later?
Yeah, absolutely. So since the time I was before the Capital Outlay Committee, I think it was January or February, I was able to attend some webinars hosted by the Clean Water Trust and the federal government about the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. And what they indicated in those meetings was that the money is going to be funneling through to the states through existing formula programs, which is the SRF program. So in order to be eligible to make use of federal infrastructure money, we have to have a project on the books and a shovel in the ground with a loan taken out to realize any principal forgiveness. I know in a recent meeting that I was in, they increased principal forgiveness from 5% to 20% on pending PFAS projects. Now, we don't have PFAS to remove, but if that's any indication as to what's going to come with the other opportunities, I think it's something the town should really strive to obtain. And the reason I propose this article getting in this year as opposed to waiting until next year is my concern is that if we do wait until next year, anyone who's realizing this now won't have time to get it on their town meeting, and we'll be right in the queue with everyone else. I'm looking at this as an opportunity for us to try to get ahead of the game and get in a good position.
Rich?
I have a question. I understand the policies and what the steps you have to go through, but we're looking at dollars. And you're not ready for that, correct?
I had put in a, what do you mean by dollars?
How much is it gonna cost?
Okay.
Thank you.
Apologies, thank you.
Didn't want to be.
We had put a placeholder, I submitted a placeholder request to Joe in the amount of $300,000 for design purposes. What I'm looking to do in between now and town meeting is the federal government released a Build Back Better kind of website that you can go through that tells you exactly where that $1.2 trillion is going to be distributed, in which funds, in which types of projects. So my plan and hope is that if there's support for this, that between now and town meeting, I'll be working to identify which bucket of money our projects will be eligible for, to present, you know, what project we're looking to actually move design towards.
So
Rich?
then, Mr. Chairman, if I could very quickly,
Joe.
so then the next process would be for the superintendent to submit the request form with the dollar amounts, convene a meeting of the Capital Outlay Committee, for them to do their fiduciary responsibility, and then I would be updating the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee on those actions.
In May, I'm sorry.
If I may just
Sure.
recall the Capital Outlay Committee meeting, I had presented, I believe it was 4 wish list projects that I had put on there, that I was in anticipation of this infrastructure money. So right now, those are still the 4 projects that I'm planning on pursuing, depending on which one meets the criteria.
And I just want to, the dollars that we need input here are still in, with the town administrator to put out in the out years. Bruce had made a comment about building out into the plan. So that's what's still outstanding, correct?
Correct. There's this item for the budget, and then there's the discussion on the plan.
Okay, so there's a budget item for '23?
Correct. That's what the superintendent's speaking to right now.
Okay, and there is none here in the budget. That number does not appear on the budget?
Correct.
Okay, so there's a wastewater budget number missing, and then,
Water, sorry.
okay, water. We have 0 in '23. There
That's
should be
gonna
a number
change.
there.
Yes.
Okay, and then we have 30 million or 32 million next year. And then we have 2.5 million year after. You just said water.
Yeah, water's up here.
So
Okay,
it's almost 2
so we're
million
good.
in 2024 for
Okay.
water.
But I guess my question, Joe, is really related to timing. How quick can we do this? And can we do it if it's not quick?
So as to the timing, the Capital Outlay Committee is no different than any other. They've been racked by vacancies. Like I said, you have the 3 members here, plus the Finance Committee Chairman and one other. So if we can get a quorum with all the meetings that are going on, we'll try to do that as quickly as we can for the budget part of it, as well as for the plan. It's just a matter of getting bodies together and getting the presentation made.
How quick will you be ready to go?
Was 48 hours as public notice?
Okay.
I'll be here on Thursday.
I guess just so everybody has exactly what we're doing, as soon as we can, we need to get this done. That's all. That's the message.
But
Mary?
certainly conceptually, it makes sense that there's this possible pot of money, and you want to be ahead of all the
Everybody
other
else.
municipalities to get part of that. I think that's very wise, and I know it's going to have a lot of people scrambling, but I think we should do it.
Julie?
We want to get our share.
I don't want to be 20 years from now and then people pointing the finger at me that we didn't get what we could.
Julie?
And I can't give them enough accolades because, you know, we tried to move, and Harwich has been doing quite well with sewer and infrastructure. I was reading how Orleans is, you know, wrapping their heads around how they're gonna pay for stuff and trying to explain to their people the benefit of qualifying for loans sooner rather than later. So I think Dan is right on the money to say we should get this together as quickly as we can and be ahead of the curve. So I appreciate you even bringing it to us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Joe.
That's my board. Does anyone on the board have a question to Dan on this particular item of the 350,000? Okay. I guess we'll wait to hear back from somebody.
Okay. So we'll wrap this up. I guess you'll both adjourn your meetings?
Yes, I'd like to entertain a motion for adjournment.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning? Okay, the vote was unanimous, and the
Motion to
meeting.
adjourn.
I make a
What?
motion to adjourn.
I didn't finish, please. Can I finish?
We're done.
Yeah, but I'm not done. Yeah.
Oh, then let's
You're
continue.
talking over him.
Yeah.
Oh,
I just-
that's novel.
I just had a comment. We've reached a unanimous decision for adjournment, and I'd also like to add, the meeting is over. There'll be no more further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Exclamation
information.
All right, so you have a motion and a second?
Yes.
Is everybody?
Meeting adjourned.
Okay. Did you take a vote?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, all right. Just making sure for the minutes.
Michael, can some of us stay? We're not the top.
The question is,
Okay,
when
so
we
we
get
could go
tired
down,
of it.
I'm happy to do whatever you feel we should
You
do.
said that you get tired of you.
I would say if
That's
you
the
have a
question.
quorum
When we
present,
get tired
you
of
should
it.
probably open your meeting again to anyone that wants to stay. So if you end up with a quorum, you open your,
Nice to see you.
because we're gonna be talking about deliberating on the cultural.
I think.
Sure.
So what, can we just go down and sit in the audience then? No?
You know, if you have a quorum in the room for a topic, it is. Just gonna poll the finance committee, who is going to stay for the rest of the meeting and the conversation? 1, 2,
I was planning on it.
3, 4. So I would say, John, you should now reopen your meeting,
Okay,
and then take a roll call vote on who's gonna stay.
okay.
And then you're welcome to go out in the audience, but because you have a quorum, you should notice it as a meeting, and,
Okay,
it's the safest way to go.
sure, thank you.
So,
Make a motion.
make a motion to reopen.
I'd like to make a motion to reopen the meeting for the Finance Committee.
Second the motion?
It's been motioned and seconded.
Now just a roll call vote for who's gonna stay.
Just for a roll call vote on who's going to stay?
Mark Emersall stay.
Is Mark staying? No? Did you say no, Dan?
Yes.
Oh, yes, okay.
No, he's not staying.
Oh, he's not staying. Mark?
Mark Kelleher staying.
Staying? Karen?
said staying.
Angelo?
Staying most of the time.
Okay. Dale?
Not staying.
Not staying. John, we have a quorum present to stay. It's five. Is Mark staying or? Is Mark
He
staying?
said he is.
Mark Amherst is staying. Yeah.
Do you want these?
Yeah, I think we leave it for quorum.
Yeah, so go ahead and go out
Yeah,
there.
okay.
You just can't.
No problem. No problem.
You can listen.
Yeah. Thank you.
And John, that's just because it's not on the agenda.
No problem.
Mary, if you would you do the consent agenda B, C, and D, and then we're gonna go back to A.
Okay. I move that we vote to approve the consent agenda with 3 items. First, vote to approve a Caleb Chase Award in the amount of $1,000. Second, vote to approve a second Caleb Chase in the amount of $976.42. And last, to approve the Board of Selectmen meeting minutes for August 30th, 2021.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded to approve consent agenda items B, C, and D. Any discussion from the board? Roll call vote. Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. 3-0, and I will tell Joe when he comes back in. A, consent agenda, we're gonna take up separately, and Chief, if you would. And I would just tell everyone the mics are still on, so we can hear you. Bob and Dan, sorry, mics are still on.
Am I good?
Chief, you are good.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dave Gilmet, Chief of Police. I'm here once again to announce the retirement of yet another officer, full-time police officer, Harwich Police. I think this is the 4th in as many months. So this is definitely fairly uncharted territory for us, but we're trying to deal with it. You'll see me next week with some good news. So this is actually good news, too. It's Officer Richard Buttrick has announced his intention to retire after serving nearly 20 years in the community of Harwich as a police officer. So Rick came to us with about 10 years' experience in investigations, I think, and as also as a military veteran. So he kind of hit the ground running, and he took on a couple big jobs right off. He, within a couple of years of joining us, he became one of our lead firearms instructors, and he also took on the responsibility of being an officer in charge. An officer in charge runs a shift of officers when there is no sergeant available to run the shift of officers. So those are big jobs, and he obviously embraced those responsibilities. And we want to thank him for his years of service and wish him obviously a very long, healthy, and happy retirement. He is also asked to stay on as a special police officer, so in my memo to you, There's a particular date there. His last day is March 19th, which is Saturday, I believe. So I have requested that you appoint Rick as special police officer effective March 20th, 22.
Thank you, Chief. Comments from the board, Larry?
Just provide our congratulations and hope he has a happy retirement.
Absolutely. I
Mary?
will.
No, just echo Larry's comments.
Julie?
Yeah, no, I just, congratulations, it's great to be able to retire, and I know he's been in town for quite some time, so it's great for him, bad for us, as usual, right?
Yeah, congratulations from the board, and another asset missed. I mean, he's been a strength on that force, and
Yeah.
starting over with a lot of people.
Interesting side note, his son followed him into service for his country, joined the United States Marine Corps Reserve, got deployed, came back, and pursued a career in law enforcement. He now is a full-time police officer in Yarmouth PD, Boston, so.
So you can't convince him to come here?
Maybe we can,
We didn't have any openings when he was available, unfortunately.
maybe we could recruit him. Joe Powers, Town
Thank you,
Administrator?
Mr. Chairman. I'd like to take the point of personal privilege, if I could, to engage in this conversation as Town Administrator to say my congratulations to Officer Buttrick, and also just put out there that as the past president of the Patrolmen's Association, he was great to deal with. And my quick story is I met Officer Buttrick on a day in July of 2019 when he handed me the executed contract and said, "I gotta go. I heard there's a tornado coming." And so we ran, we put it in the vault, and that was my first meeting with Officer Buttrick. Every meeting since then has gone much better, but we certainly, as we all have said, I want to offer my congratulations to him. And he will be sorely missed, but it's great to have him join the ranks as a special police officer. Thank you.
Michael, do we not have to
We have to
move
make a motion. Yep, Mary's gonna
Okay.
do that next.
I move that we vote to approve the retirement of Officer Richard Buttrick from the Harwich Police Department and approve his appointment as Special Police Officer effective March 20th, 22.
Second.
Moved and seconded. With no further discussion, roll call vote. Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I am an aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. New business A, discussion and possible vote to accept the town administrator's initial performance evaluation for the finance director. As you all recall, we did this with the fire chief and the police chief, and we gave the evaluation on the town administrator. Our fourth direct hire, and not in any particular order, is our finance director, and here we are to say all the wonderful things that we've been saying about Carol Coppola in public, and to accept Joe's initial, and then, as we discussed in the past, send any comments to the town administrator to attach to her evaluation for a final evaluation. And I will start with Julie.
I literally don't have enough words to say how highly I think of you, Carol, and how I think every single thing you do is superior. So I just want to thank you for all your hard work, continuous hard work, so thank you.
Mary?
I have no idea how your head doesn't spin and go right off its axis. And the audit was just a professional view of what an outstanding job you do. You know, and I know others contribute, but you're the leader of that department and get all the other departments to follow the rules. So kudos to you, Carol. Outstanding performance.
Larry?
Yeah, Carol, certainly agree with those comments. My add to that is I very much appreciate your educating us on the finance issues that I keep asking you questions about. And secondly, your knowledge and communication skills to talk to people in town to ask you questions. It does confuse people, and that's absolutely critical. Very much appreciated.
Joe, do you want to make any comments before I make final comment?
I certainly do, because I always enjoy saying wonderful things that are earned by Carol, much to her chagrin, I think. But I want to emphasize that, you know, the board has directed me to do evaluations, initial evaluations of my peers, and it's a part of the job that I don't like, because she is a peer, as are the chiefs. However, it gave me an opportunity to codify for Carol, as I was able to do with the other chiefs. And I say that because I look at Carol as our chief financial officer for sure. The town is blessed, and I'm blessed to have great colleagues and great peers, and Carol's right there with them. Everything tonight that we're talking about relates to money. Otherwise, she's got nothing to do. And so when you hear the auditors, which to me is tremendously gratifying to talk about the award-winning report that we have won every year, we the town through Carol, and that's part of the great book we talk about that's available for town meeting. And tonight we have in front of us a smaller version, but no less powerful, and all of that ties back to Carol's skills as our finance director, town accountant. And so as much as I don't enjoy the process, I very much enjoy working with Carol and our colleagues, and she's deserving of the praise that we're giving her tonight.
So I would just echo the comments of the rest of the board. Outstanding is an understatement to your work. You have brought the town finances to a completely different level. And one thing I appreciate the most is how direct you are. You're not trying to sugarcoat anything ever. If you ask a question, you get the answer, and it doesn't matter if you side with that answer or not, it is the answer. So thank you for being so direct and for an outstanding finance director.
Thank you very much. It's been such a nice evening and the kind words, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you, Carol. All right, next up be discussion and possible vote on scheduling the Board of Selectmen to participate in the Chief of Police's annual licensing meeting with Chapter 138 licenses, and that would be our liquor license holders. Joe, do you want to?
Just, Mr. Chairman, you'll see that there's a memorandum in the packet. The dates that Chief is offering have been confirmed to work with staff as well. So all three of the dates are the middle of May, either Tuesday, May 17th, Wednesday, May 18th, or Thursday, May 19th, and each of those dates is corresponding to a 10 a.m. start time. So we'd just be looking for direction from the board as to what date you want us to rely upon, because as you've said, Mr. Chairman, and as the board, as the licensing authority, I think it's excellent that the board will be participating at some level in that meeting.
Julie, this was a request that you've had in all of our hearings, that we are involved in this hearing, so here we are. Is there a date that works best for you? We'll let you pick and see if you get voted down.
I vote for Wednesday, the 18th.
I'm available. Mary?
The only one I'm available is the 19th. I waited till town meeting was over, and then I'm going away. So
Okay.
I won't be back until the 19th.
Larry, can you make the
I'm fine with
19th?
it. Yeah.
You can make the 19th?
The 19th?
I'm
I
voting
think I
on the
can do
19th.
either one.
If you can't make it, we'll-
It was 19th is a Thursday?
yes.
Wednesday's better for me than Thursday. I know
Oh, it's
that.
2 to 2 then.
Do we all need to be there?
We do not all need to be there.
I'm okay if it's best for you the other day.
All right, Wednesday it is?
I just know I have standing meetings on Thursday, so without checking.
I do too.
All right, if the board doesn't mind, I'm going to skip around a little bit here, and I'm going to drop down to D. There's several faces I know that want to speak about the cultural center, and the board is going to vote. C's going to take some time, because as long as the board will stay, we're going to be voting articles in, so. Is it all right with the board to take up cultural center first?
Sure.
All right, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you'll see in your packet at the board's request regarding a discussion on the operations of the Cultural Center. Again, I'm going to be somewhat of a conscientious objector insofar as I'm going to say that the Cultural Center resides at the municipal building at 204 Sisson Road. And so it is a portion of the overall building operation. But knowing how much discussion we're going to have and how critical this has been to the mission of the town with regard to culture, what you have in your packet are financials that were developed in tandem with our finance director and information supplied by our assistant town administrator, who right now is serving as a temporary manager, if you will, and we rely again upon the great work of Talitha Abramson, who is our temporary person on staff there. So what you'll see there are figures related to the cultural center, income and spending, for year-to-date ending in February of this year. You can see information that the finance director has culled together for prior requests, both FinCom and interested citizens. That's now shared with you, the board. And then you have the line item accounting detail from our fund accounting software. So at this point, Mr. Chairman, be ready, willing, and able, hopefully, to answer any questions that arise.
All right, and given the cultural center is in the draft warrant, I will allow public to speak broadly about the cultural center, whoever's here, because it is covered under the open meeting law, because it's also under the draft agenda, draft warrant articles that we're going to be talking about tonight. Larry, this really did originate with you at this part of it anyway, so I'll start with you.
Thank you, Michael, and yeah, thanks for providing a lot of the expense information I asked about. And what my request was that we know not only operational expenses, but obviously what the full operational revenue, what the operational expenses were. And I get a lot of questions on this, but I think a lot of people, I know me personally, I get criticized for sometimes trying to run the town as a business. And I'd only state that that's not my goal. My goal is to have the same information as a business would have. The decisions are obviously different. We don't ask the library to make profit. We don't ask the community center to be profitable. I doubt whether we ask the cultural center to be profitable. My point was we should understand and tell the residents what the revenues are and what the expenses are. And I do appreciate this. The part I am missing, and I'm hoping that we do have a capital plan that shows $1 million, I guess, in the
2026, Larry.
in 2026 in the plan.
Yep.
Which has a lot of interesting items for generator, window replacements, and so on. Unless I'm missing something, there are other capital items that have been discussed in the past. A new roof, for instance, has come up. So I think there are other regarding the elevator possibly, and I would like to go back to that and have a better accounting of what all the capital maintenance requirements are going forward. But I certainly appreciate this report, Michael, because they answered a lot of the questions I wanted to understand. I still do have some difficulties with the staffing request, and that is, we have a tight budget. We have several needs in town, and I'd like to have that clarified. I know, Joel, you made an excellent presentation last week. In my mind, I still struggle with a position that has three different roles that can be seen as quite different. One of management, one of running the cultural center, all their different activities, management of the building, running the cultural center activities, and then the third one is grant writing. I don't know if those coalesce into one position that's actually doable. And so I think we do need help, but I would like to have some more thought on what our overall goal is. I think we started, Michael and the rest of the board, as a plan to see if we can make a go of it, and we've had some success on that. I think now's the time to look at it and say, well, is that enough at this point? We have an asset in town that is important to us, but I don't think we've really had a plan to how do we look at it. We've had discussions on an incubator kitchen, Joe, you brought up, and that's been a discussion for some years. Could we do more things for the cultural activity in town, and we had a better plan for it? We're spending a lot of money. In the last 5 years, it's been a little under $600,000 supporting that. And I'd just like to be sure we have some direction before we step forward in the staffing and without having a clear goal in mind. So I guess I'm ready to listen, but I'm not comfortable where we are now.
Thank you, Larry. Joe, do you want to respond to any of that? And then I will go to the rest of the other board members and the public.
Can I say no?
You can.
By that, I mean to say, I've covered a lot of it, and I wouldn't disagree with anything that Selectman Ballantyne has said. Again, I'm not trying to be cute or snarky when I say that, the entire property of 204 Sisson Road contains a building that we're probably, by my estimation, only using half of it for cultural aspects. But again, the question for me remains, I do not have staffing resources long-term, and that would be next fiscal year for that building. So that's the primary objective I'm trying to achieve, while doing no harm to what has been achieved, I think, to a great degree for cultural aspects. So I said no, but that's probably the best I can say, and I don't know, it's not intended to sort of refute or really to even go any further. I'm looking for direction from the board as well as to what you would like me to focus on, and I'll be able to continue to articulate for the benefit of what's being proposed until the board tells me one way or the other.
Thank you. And Julie and Mary, do you want to hear from the public first, or do you have specific questions now?
I don't have questions, I was gonna make a comment.
Go ahead.
I was pleased to see this is the first time when this came out in the packet that I've seen numbers for the cultural center. And considering we're only using half of the building and we have no staff there right now, I think that's pretty impressive. If we start using the other half of the building, I think we'll do quite well. And the other thing, I'd sent Joe an email, because we had this discussion last week. The job, I think, is a very doable job. When I started at the pantry, I was the first employee, so it was all volunteers, and now they were gonna have an employee. I was the director, so let's call that the director of the cultural center. I was in charge of the building. I was the only employee there. Now, that didn't mean I was doing plumbing or electrical work, but I was in charge of seeing what was going on, taking input from volunteers and board members, and then getting people to fix it, and grant writing. I think that a combination of tasks is very doable when you start. I see as this grows, maybe we then add a full-time grant writer, which my replacement, Chris Menard, who took over the pantry, it was right at the time I was thinking, I really need a grant writer, it's using a lot of my time. So she and I agreed when she took over, and I now do the grant writing part-time for her. I think this is a very doable plan, and I'm very in favor.
Julie?
So I think Mary's comments mimic a lot of mine. I think the grant writing piece too will grow over time, and I think it may help even more than just the cultural center. But I also just have a question in terms of the numbers we're looking at. Didn't we also get some grants are they not factored in here? Didn't we get some grant money towards when we got our cultural center grant? I don't remember.
I know it went to the cultural council and the cultural district. I don't believe the cultural center got any grants.
Got anything?
No,
Okay.
not yet.
So that was my only other question.
Okay.
Oh, like Cindy's.
Cindy Williams, I think this works. Can you hear me? After not hearing anybody tonight, I'll make sure that you can. So when Charlene, the planner, and myself, the previous planner, and myself wrote a $10,000 grant during the Cultural Compact, part of the money went to different things within the Cultural Center. But there's also some, you're still earmarked for when we have the designation for signage, marketing, et cetera. So a small amount did go towards something that we did there.
Okay, thank you. That's what I think I'm thinking of, so I have no other comments.
Mike, I have one follow-up question, if I may.
Go ahead, Larry.
I see, we have 300,000 in the revolving fund. What was the source of that? Do you remember?
So predominantly, it's been the funds that have been collecting from the rental agreements that we have with all the folks there. The balance that you see in the Munis report, so this would be the balance based on the Munis report, I believe, as of March 10th, was $316,301.44. The annual spending authorization at town meeting is $225,000. And so we'd be able to get up to 225, we can't exceed it.
Right.
And so if we spent all that, the balance would carry over to the next year. We would anticipate additional revenue coming in, and on we go.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. Just to Larry's ask on the 1.160 million capital for 2026, can we just get verification from Sean Libby that that is accurate, and if there's anything else on the horizon that he sees or near? I would only speak of the roof and probably only part of the roof. I know we still have debt on the roof that we replaced not long ago, so I don't, at least that portion of the roof, we're not gonna have to replace.
Yeah,
but-
just like in accounting, because we've had different issues come up.
Right. Now I will open it up to anyone in the public that wishes to speak on it.
Right here?
Good evening, Bob.
Good
There,
evening.
or you can sit at the table, whichever you're more.
Can I sit at the table?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it's just a little more comfortable.
Yep, just keep that mic in front of you.
It's right there. I don't know how you do this every week or whatever. It's a lot of work, and I thank you for it, actually. I don't know if you hear that very often, but it's quite a commitment. And,
Thank you.
And when I come here,
Could you just
occasionally.
state your name
Oh,
again?
Bob Piantadosi, 89.
Thank you.
And when I do show up, it's usually something, just kind of sparked a thought or an interest or a concern. And as far as the cultural center goes, or I guess it's 204 Sisson Road or the middle school, whichever title you want to give it. And I was listening to your joint meeting the other evening. I should probably find some other things to do, but I did that. And here's just some thoughts. And there are questions and thoughts about, and you take your own world experience and you look at these things as, okay, how would I do this? Or, what is it about that's troubling? First, disclosure. I played pickleball there. I know, Michael, you're just, one of those pickleball players.
I love pickleball, just not the rates.
Okay,
But go ahead.
well, I hear you. So, so therefore, I am not against repurposing this particular building. And, it's, in some ways, it makes a lot of sense. And the other thing that has to be acknowledged, and, trying to be fair, is the work that's gone into, and I think that's gone into bringing it to where it is from zero to this particular place. But, there's a but, $600,000 has been spent, or the shortfall is $600,000. Now, you have all the numbers, I'm not privy to everything that you have. So that concerns me, because, and then we started talking about hiring somebody. Well, I know that's $100,000 by the time we fund it and pay the benefits and everything else. So now, okay, that's also a concern. What I'm also concerned about the underpinnings of this. And this venture going forward, I think, based on what I know, and again, is I think we're going to have some financial difficulties going forward on the short and the long term. After listening to that particular meeting, and I started thinking, here's my first question, and this is about, Mr. Powers, I think you, and other folks have mentioned this, hiring a manager. Mary, I just listened, you're great. I mean, you're volunteering, doing these things. We're talking about $100,000. I had my own company, recruiting and consulting. I would, if I had a client that came to me and said, well, we're going to do a grant writer, a sales and marketing person, a cultural affairs person, I would say, stop. You really don't know what you need. Identify your need, and then, then we would do a resume request. We'd say, okay, we're going to put this out there. What does this look like? How do we hire this person? We're hiring. We're not unless you can get a volunteer to do it. I say, great. So that's and that was mentioned at the meeting by one of the members of the finance committee, that we're putting the cart before the horse. We're hiring somebody. We're not quite sure what we're going to do with this yet, with this build up. So my question is, we ask the hard questions now, and some of those hard questions are, should you do a HABU study? And anyone knows what that is. It's, we're talking about whether this is a viable piece of property, highest and best use. The questions you would ask in this is this physically possible? Can you do what you want to do in the space that you have? Is it legally permitted? Would we be, is it financially feasible? And is it maximally productive? So that's why I'm saying we have to ask the hard questions. Because if you don't, you're just going to walk yourself into a quagmire down the road and say, oh, well, we didn't know that. So here's another question. Would we, if we were starting from scratch, be comfortable asking the taxpayers to build a 70,000 square foot building at today's construction rates of $380 a square foot? That's about $26 million for a project that's probably potentially going to generate negative revenue, or maybe it's neutral, I don't know. Not produce a lot of jobs, because those spaces don't, they're people, they're doing whatever they're doing, but I'm not sure that they're creating a lot of jobs and opportunities. So if not, why not? Why would we try to sell that to a taxpayer? A 70,000 square foot building at $26 million, because this is what we're going to do with it? I'm not sure we would do that. And to recognize that, it was a $600,000 loss over 5 years. And we have 100% occupancy for part of the building. And Mary made a great point. We haven't done the other part yet. But when you do the other part, I'm guessing, and this is, I don't have any hard pieces of evidence, but I'm going to say, well, I'm sure the pieces in that building that need to be rectified, fixed, repaired. I heard elevator, air conditioning. That concerns me a lot. So the other question I have is, what's the final build-out cost? Capital needs going out 5 to 10 years. Mr. Powers, I love your comment last time, but I'm going to disagree with you. We cannot MacGyver our way through this project, estimating point to point, what's the project going to cost us going out 5 to 10 years? If you have those numbers and it works, I'd say, hallelujah, go do it. I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure we're there yet. We're there, quite there at this point. Finance Committee has thrown up some red flags, and we need to pay attention to it. My fear that we'll find ourselves in the out years of this project, and we don't do our due diligence, and at the end it will say, why didn't we ask the hard questions at the outset? I know there's lots of reasons to do it. This is a want or a need. I'm not sure which it is. I love playing pickleball there, and I see the potential for other things, but it's 70,000 square feet of building space that needs work going forward, and I think just put that in, as you factor all of this, please take those into consideration, because it would be a shame to come back and say, well, it's too big to fail now. We spent all this money. We don't want to walk away from it. And I thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Bernadette, just state your name for the record, and you can be either place you want to be.
Bernadette Waystack, Chair of the Cultural Council in Harwich, renter at the Cultural Center at 204 Sisson Road, and swore I was just coming tonight to listen. Not to play point-counterpoint, but just a few quick things. I was watching the meeting the other night, too. I thought that Mr. Powers made a very good point that perhaps a lot of people didn't catch. I understand. It does look like we're giving them a huge task in the job description as it's right now crafted for a director. But there's such a thing as arts administration. It's a field, it's a study, it's a degree people have been getting in schools for 40 years at least. That's how people run museums, that's how people run cultural centers, that's how people run those kinds of public arts centers. So that is something to consider, that it's not as outrageous as it sounds to a lot of people. Maybe especially because when people come at it with a corporate mindset. But not only someone with a degree in arts administration, but most people who are artists or involved in arts education, which I have been for over 25 years in this town, in the public schools as well. We learn how to write grants because that's how we survive. That's how we find the funds. I wrote grants to the Cape Cod Art Education Foundation, to the Arts Foundation, to a number of places when I was a teacher in that building at 204 Sisson Road for years, and took many of your children on a field trip to Provincetown every year for them to learn about their cultural heritage and their artistic legacy here on the Cape. And I made sure that I scrambled and I found the grant money I needed so that no child had to pay even $3 or $4 or $5 for that field trip, because I didn't want them to have to pay. I wanted to make sure everyone would be able to go. So if there's one place where people know how to write grants as part of their job, it's artists and arts administrators. The other point I just want to pick up on there is, I think if you look at what's going on here, even if you look at the pie chart, you look at how much money and revenue that you've gotten year to date, and a huge amount of it's come from us paying our rents, and a minuscule amount has come from the untapped potential that's there. It doesn't even mention the kitchen. And so I think that if you look in context of, with everything that's happened in the midst of COVID, and everything's happened on the backs of the renters more than anyone else, we're showing the great potential that we have as far as the concept of the cultural center. And any building in town, as Mr. Power said, is going to need a manager or is going to need someone who's overseeing it. So, you know, that's a different matter. The building belongs to the town, and if the town is going to keep the building, the town is going to have to figure out how to and whether to fund it and care for it and repair and keep it up. I think that we're arguing about two different tracks here, and maybe a lot of people are aware of that. One is the idea of the director to help us grow the potential of what the concept of the cultural center is, and the other is the infrastructure and what is coming, no matter what the building ends up getting used for or turned into. That's still going to happen. And I don't think it's fair to say, well, if you were going to start over with a new building, well, we're not. Of course we're not. But we have a building that's here, and we've already decided that we think we want to keep it and commit to maintaining it, and that's just going to happen. That's actually kind of separate from what we have going on in it now, and whether what we have going on in it now should go forward and is worth doing. I hope that's all I'll say tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I would just say that this is not the final debate on the cultural center, and it is 8:36. So if we can shorten some of the comments tonight, we will have plenty of time to talk about this. Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen.
So I just wanted to just touch on a couple of...
Who are you?
Oh, sorry. I said it before, you don't remember?
No.
Cindy Williams, Executive Director of the Harwich Chamber.
Thank you.
I have been extremely involved, as many of you know, with the cultural designation that we're going through. Part of that, when they came, was the highlight of the building at 204 Sisson, which is home to our cultural center. Also, as Mary Anderson mentioned, in her previous life as the Executive Director of the Family Pantry, you manage a building as an Executive Director. You do the daily operations, you have volunteers, you also write grants. As the Executive Director of the Harwich Chamber of Commerce, I do the exact same thing. And I've been doing that in conjunction with the process of this cultural designation. There are so many assets to what is going on with that building, and there's more coming up. I am in the process right now of doing a project with Duffy Health Services in the fall at the Cultural Center, because they want to partner with us, arts, culture, and mental health. So it's a grander thing than just what previous people have spoken about, what that building is and who's in there. They're not just painters, guys. We have so much more to this, and I just hope everyone will keep an open mind to what we are doing there. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Good evening. Noreen Donahue, Headwaters, speaking on my own behalf. So I'm going to take a page out of Bob's book because a lot of ideas came out of the Thursday night meeting. It was obviously very well watched, and a lot of questions came out. So I'm not here to, put out any grand, epiphany of a plan, but I do want to kick the tires in more of a nuts and bolts way. So I have so much sympathy for Joe in terms of the fact that he has a building that needs to be managed. I have so much sympathy because back in 2012, when I was on the FinCom and we first heard eventually this building was going to be transferred over, I said, no way. I said, because I don't think it's right to have people going in and out of a building with no steady supervision. Because I used to be a building manager, and it's a nightmare. I ran a light plant and was a building manager. I got more phone calls about the building all the time than about 25,000 customers. So, it can be a nightmare. But at any rate, at that time, Joe, people said, it's working. Don't worry, Noreen. I was worried about if people had a medical problem in a bathroom, got left in there at night, things like that. But, we went ahead anyway. So here we are. So I totally agree. You absolutely need more staff in there to check the bathrooms, open and close the doors, call the right vendor when the heat's not working, all of those things. So that's on that side. But then, Joe, you really threw me when you started talking about the non-cultural kitchen, which you did last week. So I said, well, wait a minute. So I don't know if the cultural director is going to be in charge of the non-cultural kitchen. So does that mean we now have two people in there? Are they both working in the same revolving fund? Two people, one renting the kitchen, one renting the cultural things. Who's going to be the director of that revolving fund? Who has to be a one-person thing? So confusion, So I said, all right, what I'm getting up to here is, we've really never talked about a job without a job description. And, until I see something in print that can help me with some of this confusion, I very much would like to see this project work. But I don't want to see it go forward in a faulty manner. I don't want to see it go forward just because we want it to go forward. I want to see it go forward because it's a proper thing to do and it's going to be good for all of us. So I have the problems with the way people are talking about that we're going to run the revolving fund with this. As to the grant writing, it's not my field of expertise. I did talk to a couple of archivists. They said some of those things are true, but they're within the fields of arts and culture for the most part. We're talking about being a grant writer townwide. So I'm just throwing that out there. It's a little bit different, main thing I would say would be a job description to get going. But last week, a couple of the FinCom people mentioned that, they thought this was a little premature. Maybe there could be a stopgap measure. And I heard somebody suggest, this is just a suggestion, you have a housing advocate undoubtedly going in there. Be a new position, you're writing up a new job description. Add the supervision of the building to it on a part-time basis along with the part-timer. That could cover you for 2 years till we know for sure what the person's doing, where it's going. You'll get your coverage you need to have, or somebody else, a second part-timer. I also feel it's too premature to jump into a full-time person. So I'm trying to find, in my mind, stopgap measures. So just ideas. Last point I want to just touch on, because I know it is late. I know I've heard some people criticizing the use of the phrase self-sustaining. So I look back at our vote from that non-binding vote, and I was so surprised to see, and not that that matters anymore really, but nevertheless, the section under cultural center did say maintain itself as a cultural center in a self-sustaining way. That language was right in there, but besides that, my issue with the self-sustaining factor is personally, you know, I feel it does give a great benefit to the town, and that can't be quantified. So personally, you know, I'm not looking for dollar, you know, to be paid back. On the other hand, I don't want to see a train going down the tracks that's losing 600 in a few years, maybe 600 or $1 million in 5 years with the roof and that. So somewhere in the middle, we have to find something. And what I would say to people is, on the self-sustaining issue, this never went through town meeting. The transfer to the care and custody of the selectmen went to town meeting, but for the interim use as a cultural center, that was a Board of Selectmen vote. And all respect to the Board of Selectmen, who were at the time, I'm gonna hold you to a higher bar on this one. Because like if it was the community center, not self-sustaining, but we all voted. This one we never all voted on. So I expect the people who made the decision to understand that and to not push back on that phrase of self-sustaining. And again, I'm not saying it has to be exactly self-sustaining, but I constantly hear people saying, well, is the fire department self-sustaining? You know, crazy stuff. You know, let's work together and be honest about this. You know, we all know what each other is saying. And I think it's a legitimate argument to ask that something that was only purposed by the Board of Selectmen, not by the town, get a little more investigation. Thank you.
Thank you, Noreen.
I think that's probably it. I may be last. I'm batting cleanup. My name is Richard Gunderson. I live on Hiawatha Road in Howardsport. I'm going to take a little different approach, and I won't take long. Remember a while ago, Ed McManus stood up here saying he couldn't get people to volunteer for the Cranberry Harvest Festival or fireworks or something at that time of the year. And we all felt badly because it had become an annual event. Shortly thereafter, he suddenly found he had a lot of volunteers. So my point is, where are all the people in the past 6 years who think this is a great cultural center, who aren't motivated enough to put time into it, to join together, create a nonprofit like it said in the original advisory vote that Noreen just mentioned, and create a nonprofit and take it over and run it. I went through the Mass Cultural Grant applications and amounts. And that gave me a full listing of all the people, even individuals, but let's go with corporations on the Cape. And I came up with 34 companies, 34 organizations that received grants. They are all nonprofit. I couldn't find a municipal-run cultural center, arts center in the bunch. So I went and I looked at some of them, and I'm thinking, well, how did they begin? Why haven't we found something in the last 6 years so that we don't have to worry about self-sustaining or $600,000 deficit or the capital amounts to be spent on this building? Someone else will do it if they can lease the building and run it well. So let's take a few examples, and I won't go into the full amount, but I'm going to take 3 or 4. Cape Cod Cultural Center. It started with a group of concerned citizens, right off the websites. Falmouth Art Center was established in 1966 when a small group of Falmouth painters gathered and began informal art classes. Eventide Theater. We haven't even talked about performing in this facility, but it should be done. Has sponsored issue-oriented cultural events. A woman I don't think he's a woman, he's a music director at the Dennis Union Church, Noel Tipton, founded a group in 1998. But 20 years later, they're still running a financially sound nonprofit. Cape Cod Museum of Natural History. They list about 4 or 5 people who met around a table and after a long brainstorming session came up with the name, and they adopted a purpose statement, a mission statement. Last one. Not the last one that did it, but just the last of my examples. Truro Center for the Arts in Castle Hill. It was a barn. It has a lot of similarities to the former middle school. an old barn, a New England barn that had cried out for years to be converted to an art center. Eventually, the cry was heard by a group of people who wanted just that. All of these places started with a community feeling good about it and getting together and doing something, creating a mission. We don't have a mission. It's maybe a civic location, maybe it's an incubator, maybe it's art, maybe it's performance, maybe it's musical. Maybe we can do the same thing that the South Meeting House is doing. So you got to figure it all out. There's a lot of people out there doing this. Look around sometime. There's a lot of entertainment going on that we would have to compete with. You need a strong mission statement. You need a strong board of directors. You need to get it to be a nonprofit. And I don't see that happening. So I think what you're suggesting for a full-time employee is premature. You don't have the basic organization yet. The people of the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Angela, I don't want to shut you down, but I'm going to have to. And not because I don't respect your opinion, but you're a member of the Finance Committee. It's not on your agenda tonight, and you're still in an active meeting. Your chairman and I had that conversation when I asked him to reopen the meeting, but there will be plenty of time for you to speak about the Cultural Center. My apologies, but I don't want to risk an open meeting law complaint.
I understand that.
Okay.
I also should let you know that I think what has been said before is very good.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in the audience? Anyone online?
Mr. Chairman,
Good evening.
Richard Waystek. A couple of points. I keep hearing the term plan. And Mr. Chairman, you and I both served on repurpose committees for this building. The first committee, under the guidance of Mr. McParland, God rest his soul, came up with housing. It was rejected by neighbors and the community. I hear that, and I know that these two committees spent hours, countless hours, looking at this building, repurposing it. Second point, people keep talking about the cultural center of Cape Cod in Yarmouth. It's a 10th of the size of this building. No comparison whatsoever. People talk for a plan. You have a very highly regarded town administrator who oversees a $70 million budget, who has a plan, and a plan for a person to run this building. I keep hearing lots of arguments, but this is a municipal building. Is it going to be self-sustaining? Probably not. But there's substantial revenue that is still to be gained from this building by utilizing all of its resources, and very little of it have been used so far. I believe that this position is important. I think if you trust your town manager, town administrator, who's worked very hard to look into this building and to maintain a town asset that many people wanted to keep, one of the options in our first repurposing committee was to tear the building down. That was not accepted. We have a building, it can be utilized. It's not just a glorified pickleball court that a lot of folks who say they're using. And again, I believe those funds are somewhat lacking in terms of fees. People should come together, tap as much revenue from this building as possible, and continue to use it as the town asset it has been for many, many years. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else online? Any closing comments from the board? I'm going to end this subject so we can finish our meeting.
I do not.
Mary?
All set.
Julie? Okay. Thank you all. Thank you for your comments. Like I said, there's plenty of time to talk about this. All right. Mary, can I get a motion let's go to old business because I'm going to finish up with the warrant articles. So under old business, we have discussion and possible vote to approve the committee appointment recommended by the interview committee, Sandy McClarty, Planning Board, full member, term to expire June 30th, 2022. And as requested by me on the 28th of February for the board to do their own due diligence and their own homework, I stand by my position. Is there anybody on the board that wishes to make a positive motion on this agenda item?
I do not, but do we want to postpone that until Don has a chance to attend?
think I would rather get it behind us, but I would take the board's direction. Don did ask to put this on the agenda. No other board member requested it go back on.
And that's one reason I'm asking if he asked for it.
Okay. If you think that's right, I'm comfortable with it.
I'd be more comfortable with that.
Okay, we will be bringing this back. Joe, we would just ask that we put that on the next agenda.
That would be the next regular agenda.
Yeah, the 21st, I believe. Mary, I would take a motion on contract so we can finish the business before we get into the articles.
Okay. I move that we vote to accept the fiscal year 2022 Formula Grant Award from the Executive Office of Elder Affairs, EOEA, for $55,548.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in
No.
favor? Oh, go ahead. Oh, none?
No.
Roll call vote. Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I am an aye. Chairman, I would just ask that you write down when people left, because you're going to have to adjourn your minutes. You're going to have to adjourn your meeting, and then make minutes to reflect that you stayed to listen. All right, warrant items, Joe. We will start discussion on that. So you have vote to place articles in warrant, vote to withdraw articles from warrant, and recommendation votes, including but not limited to vote to recommend, accept, adopt, and any other action.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to you and the members of the board. What you have in your packet is a 10-page document that starts out with the header of standard articles. And so very quickly, those would be exactly that, meaning these are recurring articles you see year in and year out. They're not presented in the placement that they would have in the warrant necessarily, but you will see the majority of those definitely in the first third of the warrant. Page 2, you can see there's a placeholder for capital articles. Once the process on the capital outlay plan is finalized, every one of those items has its own article with corresponding funding requests, so that will be coming separately. Then you can see what are still considered to be standard regarding revolving fund authorizations, unpaid bills, and then 3 items that in years past were petitioned articles but are now incorporated, or 2 of the 3 are incorporated generally, and that's promoting the town of Harwich through our support of with the Chamber of Commerce, and supplemental annual allocation for the cultural grants. And then last but not least, under that, you can see the standard herring fisheries article that ends the warrant. And then you can see the change selectmen to select board. So, Mr. Chairman, as you know, there was a prior discussion by prior board for the town to move towards gender-neutral statements. So this would end up being a charter revision to start. And the language that's contained in that one does more than simply change the name of Board of Selectmen to Select Board. It's also meant to emphasize gender neutrality throughout the charter. And so that, I know if Selectman Howell were here, he would indicate that that was not yet a vote of the board, so I just want to emphasize that. Then there are placeholders on items that staff has made the staff aware of. So you can see those on pages 3 and 4. Page 5, we get into articles related to the Monomoy Regional School District and what may potentially appear as articles regarding those efforts. Again, you'll see in there the prospective articles on that relate to conservation that you've had discussions on previously, and additional articles from departments that lead all the way up to the community preservation articles. Those are covered on pages 7 through 9, and then pages 9 and 10 are the citizen initiative petitions. And again, just a reminder, those are articles that the board would not be voting to place in the warrant. Under the statutes, they're automatically in the warrant. So, Mr. Chairman, what's presented to you and your colleagues this evening is the most up-to-date presentation of draft articles, and so the board may contemplate voting to place articles in the warrant. That way, we can record the date for future reference for regulatory agencies, and I can start putting the framework around the booklet itself and bring it back as early as next week.
Okay, so that was my question, Joe. When are we gonna have a draft that has the descriptions underneath? And then the petition articles, what are we gonna include in the packet the legal opinions on those particular articles?
So yes, working backwards on the citizen petitions, I would certainly include in the board's packet council's opinions. Just wanted to emphasize that it should do nothing to relate to the placement of them in the warrant, and the board is always free to make any recommendations you see fit on any article, whether or not you placed it there.
So, for instance, what's traditionally operating budget, Article 4, you're not looking to assign article numbers tonight, you just want a motion to put the town operating budget in the warrant.
Correct.
And we're not supporting it because there's no numbers on there, so the numbers would be
Correct.
to be determined, but that doesn't have to be part of the motion.
Correct.
Because we're obviously gonna have an operating budget.
Correct.
And how do you want the motions to be, Joe, if we
So I
start from the
think
top?
first what we would be looking for is a motion to place, and I would ask that you refer to it by the header. So an example would be a motion to place the warrant article related to town officers and committees into the warrant. There'd be a second, and then there'd be a vote.
So
so
I
on and so
I
forth.
move to,
Correct.
okay. Mary, do you wanna take a shot at that? We'll start at the top of the list, and then we'll skip the ones we think we should skip.
Okay, so do I understand we're doing each one separately, Joe?
Yes.
Is that
Correct, yes, please.
Okay,
And just to emphasize, we're not, at this point, suggesting we support or not, this is putting it on the ballot, right?
Merely to be
There's-
placed in the warrant.
There's some, is there anything we can support tonight and get out of the way?
I think like on town officers and committees, we can support it because there's no financial component.
And then get out of
So
the
I think
way.
we can look at them individually and get them
Okay.
out of the way.
Yeah, thank you.
okay,
Then I would ask for a second motion of support after we do the first one.
okay. I move that we vote to put the town officers and committees on the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and I'm gonna do each of these by a roll call vote. If I think there needs to be discussion, I'll ask for it. If I don't, just yell out if you wanna discuss it. So roll call vote, Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I am an aye.
I move that we vote to include the reports of town officers and committees on the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call vote, Julie?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And I am an aye.
I move that we include the elected officials' salaries item on the warrant article for 2022.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call vote, Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I am an aye.
I move that we include the town operating budget on the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
I move that we include the Monomoy Regional School District budget on the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call, Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
I move that we include the Cape Cod Regional Technical School District budget on the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call, Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
I move that we include the Water Department budget on the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call, Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
I move that we include the Wastewater Department budget on the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call, Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
I move that we include the Adopt the Capital budget item on the 2022 budget warrant.
Moved and seconded, roll call, go ahead, Joe?
Sorry, I would ask that that not be voted this evening. The question is whether it's going to be the capital budget or the capital plan, so I need to work with council on that.
Okay.
Julie, would you
In years
remove-
past, it's been
would you
called the
remove your
capital plan.
second, Julie?
I remove my second.
And Mary, you remove your
Yes.
motion?
Thank you, sorry about that. And it would be the same to skip past the capital articles placeholder that you see next.
So don't do any of the
Correct.
But you can, we can go right to annual departmental
Correct.
revolving
Okay.
funds.
Yep.
I move that we include the annual departmental revolving funds authorization on the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Roll call vote, Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
I move that we include funding prior year's unpaid bills on the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call. Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
I move that we include promote the town of Harwich on the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Joe, are we still contemplating a number on this? I see a number in the free cash number. Is that something that we can vote a number on tonight to support if we decide to go back?
I'd ask if you could hold, and it'll be in next week's.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Okay. Moved and seconded, so roll call. Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
I move that we vote to include supplemental annual allocation of Mass Cultural Council for local cultural council grants on the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call. Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
I move that we include the herring fisheries item on the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call. Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Joe, on this next one, this is the one that you thought we had to vote the charter change, or is this one just to include in the warrant?
So this evening, I think it's appropriate for you to decide if you want this language to go into the warrant,
So the first motion would be
to place as you've done.
just the same as we're doing?
Correct.
Okay.
I move that we include the change selectmen to select board.
That's a good
Item.
suggestion. Let's go for it.
Oh, Mary, that one's gonna stick. All right, Mary.
On the 2022 warrant.
Second.
I'm not even gonna ask you to repeat it.
No, take a
Roll call, Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie? And I'm an aye.
Okay.
Joe, was there an action that you wanted to take on that? You said that we hadn't taken yet, or do you want to wait until next week on it?
No, meaning when I had sent when the board had voted previously, and it may have been a previous board, meaning I can't recall if it's in the entire membership.
Okay.
We're whistling past this one right now.
Yes, I'm trying.
And so, council, this is the witching hour.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna look at any of you because I'm gonna burst out laughing. Council had analyzed and provided basic language on changing the board name. However, when I informed town council that the board is looking to have this come back, he provided this additional language because it gets to gender neutrality.
So
which
this
is the-
gets us where we need to be?
Correct, but the board has never endorsed this one.
Okay.
So you are gonna have to, at a future meeting, talk about this particular item, because it does more than the original vote.
Okay.
I hope that made sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Can you add that to the notes for the agenda for next
Yes,
week? So that we
absolutely.
can tackle that and be
Yep.
done with it? So we have, I'm confused now. Do we have a motion on this one?
Yes.
have a-
And a second?
And a second.
Roll call vote, Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
Am I doing these
So,
Do you
placeholders,
want me
Joe?
to do some so you can take a break?
So,
Have I
Are
been
you
fired?
suggesting she needs a break?
I'm just saying it's a lot.
these are called placeholders because these are articles that have not previously been entertained or the board has been aware of.
Okay.
And so they're absolutely meant to be discussed by you tonight as to whether you think the topic should be placed in the warrant.
So we're not gonna discuss them tonight, but if you could cut this section, next week when we have the full board, we will discuss those.
Okay, so we're not gonna make motions on
I think these placeholders, we hold off on so that the board can vote whether they want them in this form or not. And I think, given the hour, we don't wanna have that conversation
Yeah,
tonight.
because we ended up discussing them twice if we do them tonight.
Um,
Okay.
Joe, for instance, right now, your housing advocate and your director of cultural affairs are in the operating budget. So this would be a separate action if we were to vote on and talk about
Correct.
those tonight, yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I would just assume.
No, I think that's prudent. I also just want to emphasize to the board that where on page 1, you put in a standard article for the Monomoy Regional School District budget, just be aware that on page 5, as a placeholder, is articles that get to the regional agreement amendment, And depending upon the form that you use, and this can be discussed briefly Thursday night when you meet with the regional school district, it may impact upon the article you've already placed. So there is a separate article related to the agreement, but depending upon the form of it, it may impact upon the budget one that you previously put in. So I think for that reason, it's highly prudent to hold off on any placeholders this evening.
So these placeholders, Joe, we really need to schedule about an hour to talk about these.
Understood.
I think there's going to be a fair amount of debate on some of them, and this school one, it's going to take you 45 minutes to explain it to me.
So then, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, if I could, I would draw your attention to page 7.
So and I would just say, if I may, Joe, sorry to cut you off, the Harwich Water Dependent Structures and the Harwich Wetlands Protection Bylaw, they're coming back to us on the 21st to discuss those.
Yeah.
So I don't want to approve those. And then on the
Correct.
on the Historical Commission one, they're meeting with, they haven't voted their newest form of theirs yet. So that's supposed to come back from them before we put it on the agenda. Okay, now, sorry, I cut you off. Where were you?
No, quite all right. So if you draw your attention to page 7, you'd be picking up where you'd be placing the community preservation articles into the warrant. And as you would imagine, given the work that the Community Preservation Committee has done, these are far greater along the process as far as structure.
Okay. Do you want each one of these individually, or do you want these, I suppose we should keep in concert with individual?
Correct. And that's just if there's ever a question in the future, you can indicate you've done each individually.
Okay. Mary, you're not fired, so if you want to keep going, go ahead.
We'll see how I do. I move that we include the Community Preservation Act Land Bank Debt Service in the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call vote. Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
I move that we include the Community Preservation Act administrative expenses in the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call. Julie?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
I move that we.
And I'm an aye.
Oh, sorry.
You were an aye, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I move that we include the Community Preservation Act East Harwich Union Cemetery Gravestone Preservation Project in the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call. Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
I move that we include the Community Preservation Act Part-Time Housing Coordinator in the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion. Joe, this is a placeholder in case the director isn't, housing advocate is not approved. If that's the case, then we will be using this money. If the advocate's approved, we will not be using this money.
Correct. However, administrative conundrum being reviewed.
Okay,
That's all I'll say about that.
so we can vote to put this in the warrant?
Absolutely.
Okay, roll call. Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Larry?
And then the location of this will be decided, because I assume we do the full first, right? This will be
Correct.
back up.
Yep.
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
I move that we include the Community Preservation Act Affordable Housing Trust in the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Joe, the only question, is that the appropriate title for that? Affordable Housing Trust what?
Funding.
I can only speak to the fact I think this may have come from CPC in this manner and been vetted by council in this manner. So I think perhaps we could rely upon the explanation that talks about this is an annual request from the Affordable Housing Trust to supplement income for the trust.
Can you just make sure that is copacetic with advertising in a warrant, so the
Yes.
public is aware of what it is
Yep,
without reading
absolutely.
the description? And roll call vote. Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
Thank you.
I move that we include the Community Preservation Act Phase 2 of the Natural Heritage Trail Boardwalk Project in the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call. Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
I move that we include the Community Preservation Act Penrose LLC Cape Cod 5 Housing Project in the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. The only discussion I have on this, Joe, we have to put these in, correct?
Right.
They're going in the warrant regardless, whether we support them or not.
Correct.
Okay.
Essentially.
Roll call vote, Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
I move that we include the Community Preservation Act pickleball project at Brooks Park in the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, Mary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
I move that we include the Community Preservation Act purchase conservation restriction at the Spruce Woods project in the 2022 warrant.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
Do we-
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make a note on that. I was informed by the chair of the Real Estate and Open Space that the numbers will change, because these are scrivener's errors.
Yeah.
So now that we have it in there, we can manipulate it, so to speak.
I was gonna say, that's 9:50, not 9:45.
Do we do the citizens ones, Joe?
No, the citizen petitions are already on the warrant. The
Okay.
next step that you would take up is your discussion and votes as to whether or not you recommend the article.
Okay.
I think we do that in one block at a future meeting.
Yeah. So that's the end, right?
Do you wanna go back through and pick the ones we can support and end this within 15 minutes, or? You can.
John Shorey, I guess Chair of the Finance Committee. I just want to ask Joe, it's more of a, I think, a miss, Joe, on the CPC articles. The one on the pickleball courts should also include basketball courts. It's a joint venture of two things there. And all I heard was pickleball mentioned, and I didn't see it in the article as basketball also.
All right, so that's another one we'd have to send back to council. Council is working off of the motions directly from Community Preservation Committee. So we'll
We'd have to look at that motion.
Correct.
and-
Yep.
Versus how it was presented to finance.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yep.
'cause it clearly mentions, the article I've seen says both basketball and pickleball. That was from CPC.
Do you want us to remove it for now?
No, I think it's better to place it because then we have the framework of the warrant,
Okay.
but we can work within the warrant going
Okay.
forward.
And there's just one other CPC article that's missing from here, and it follows in tandem with the Spruce Woods project. They also approved $12,500, I think, for surveying.
Administrative funds request?
Yes, it's coming, I believe it's coming out of administrative.
And we did vote on that, John.
But that wasn't to be put in the warrant. We voted that to take it out of prior appropriation, correct?
Yeah, correct. That was my understanding. That wasn't an article.
Can you look at that?
I can show you, Joe, right here.
I thought we were moving forward with that.
I mean, it doesn't matter to me, it's what I have was an article.
So there's more articles to come before the board if you want me to
To
work
add
with
that?
Chairman and anyone
That's
else.
fine, because it's not in the packet, so I can't read it anyway.
Right.
It's not.
So just show Joe and highlight it, and we're not taking that out.
I just want to be accurate, that's
Yep,
all. It's
accurate's good.
Okay.
So, if you want, I can tell you the ones, if you want to go
So,
back to the beginning of the
yeah,
list, tell you
Mr.
the ones we
Chairman, if I-
can support.
What was just handed to me is the administrative matter that's not an article.
Okay,
It's use of funds for an appraisal cost. It's an existing project. It's separate and distinct.
John, I'll explain that to you tomorrow.
Okay, sure. I just thought it was a CPC article.
Just trying to sneak a peek at the pickleball one you were talking about. So you can see that their motion only refers to pickleball. So we'd have to vet that.
Well, Eric's coming before us Thursday night, I think. We can clear it up there. Thank you.
First two we can certainly support.
Okay. I move that we vote to support the article, town officers and committees.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call vote, Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
So, Mr. Chairman, sorry, but what I would ask is that the motion be that to move to recommend, accept, and adopt.
Okay, so we'll withdraw,
Anytime you're looking to do.
withdraw the second,
Yeah, withdraw the second.
withdraw the motion.
Yep. Recommend, what was the other word?
Accept and adopt.
accept and adopt.
For some reason, that's our standard language.
It's a mouthful. Okay, I move that we vote to recommend, accept, and adopt the article on town officers and committees.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call vote. Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. She can do away with the recommend part, right? Just accept and adopt, Joe?
Correct.
Okay. So Mary, we don't have to do
Say
recommend.
recommend?
Yep.
Okay.
So, yep,
I
2.
move that we accept and adopt the reports of town officers and committees.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call vote. Julie?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. These budget ones we cannot.
Okay.
Revolving funds we cannot. Unpaid bills we cannot.
Is our work done?
I think our work, herring fisheries.
Yes.
I move that we accept and adopt the herring fisheries
Article.
article.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call. Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Joe, that's probably it, right?
Correct.
Okay. Town administrators report?
Just to be consistent and fair, want to offer, on behalf of the town, our congratulations to the cheerleading squad at Monomoy Regional High School, coached by none other than our cemetery administrator. They performed yesterday in state competition, yesterday being Saturday the 13th, and they placed 8th in the group, and it's an excellent showing, and it's just fantastic. They were able to make it that way. Incredibly competitive, so again, tip of the cap to the Monomoy Sharks that are our cheerleading squad at the high school, and congratulations to their coach, Robin Kelly.
Thank you, Joe. If that's it, Selectmen's report, Larry?
None.
Mary?
Nothing.
Julie?
Nothing.
And I would just say that Thursday night, the 17th, this Thursday night at 6 o'clock, we have a meeting with Finance, joint meeting with Finance Committee. And that agenda will be posted tomorrow, but there'll be some open discussion at the end of it on the budget in its entirety.
I need to close my meeting, right?
I would close your meeting.
I'd like to entertain a motion to close the meeting, make a motion.
I forgot my computer, but nevertheless, could you print out the warrant?
Only 3 members here, so they all agree to the motion. So motion's adjourned.
Okay. So the motion is to close the Finance Committee meeting, and the 3 remaining members are in agreement with that, and you have notes on when the other members left.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I would take a motion.
All right.
So move.
Second.
Motion is to adjourn
Thank you,
and
Larry.
seconded. Roll call, Larry?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I am an aye.
Woo-hoo.
Adjourned.